Board's hearing of December 20th. Few things, please shut your phones off if you haven't already. If you're here to speak about the airport, there is a clipboard going around. Please put your name and address on it and pass it on up here when you're done with that. And at this time, I'd ask Mr. Select Board Member Trask to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if there's no objections from my fellow board members, I'd like to take correspondence out of order and start with that.
Thank you.
Hearing no objection. We received a number of letters about our last select board hearing, and I want to read the first letter, which is from D. Jojoko, the chairman of the Human Rights and Inclusion Committee. And Mr. Jojoko wrote, "Dear select board members, I watched the select board meeting of 12/6/2022 and was extremely troubled by the line of questioning received by the candidates recommended for consideration to the HRIC. Let me preface by saying that the Select Board has the ultimate authority to appoint or not appoint members of the HRIC. However, I believe that this process should be objective, fair, and not degrading to candidates. Let me also remind us that inclusion was first on our town's recently adopted core values. The concerns and outrage expressed by one of the Select Board members during his questioning of the candidates was misguided. The outrage should have been directed or addressed to the perpetrators of the indecency that occurred in our town a few years ago and traumatized and harmed residents. The outrage should not be addressed to whoever dares to ask questions about the transgressions. This is an example of the way some members of our town are not treating all residents with dignity and respect and making it difficult for black and brown people to participate in town committees. We looked for candidates not only who were credible in their community involvement and justice-oriented work, but with intention to create opportunities for more racial representation on a committee that champions diversity, equity, and inclusion work with intention to elevate voices in our community that historically have not had access to committees and boards that serve our community. To that end, we were extremely disheartened by the way in which our candidates, two women of color, volunteering their time, wisdom, and expertise to make Danvers a more inclusive place, were made to feel unwelcomed, even prior to the start of their work on this committee. The work often requires unveiling the ugly truth about our community, whether it is harmful behavior filled by ignorance or certain outcomes that are products of systems of oppression. To suggest that acknowledging this truth is a problem rather than the behavior of mindsets is irresponsible at least and harmful at most. We have been working very hard the last few months to learn from our mistakes as a town and move on from previous incidents. But interactions and comments like the ones expressed by a select board member are testament to the fact that we haven't learned enough and still have a lot of work to do. I believe that we will continue to experience these issues until we are serious about them, humble enough to learn from our mistakes, educate ourselves, and look at all residents with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, national origin, religion, or sexual orientation, and until outdated policy that continues to allow these transgressions to occur is changed. While we are open to inquiries about our candidates' experiences and skills, we do not condone the spreading of misinformation about other organizations or groups in our community that have also engaged in DEI work, regardless of how that work may be perceived by some. The NAACP isn't a pariah that we must be afraid of. The town and our committee works with the NAACP, and we will continue to do so. We may not agree with everything, but let me remind you that the NAACP is the oldest civil rights organization in the country and the North Shore branch created an ad hoc Danvers committee composed of over 20 Danvers residents and stakeholders. At the HRIC, we will continue to create opportunities and space for the marginalized residents and those who seek to volunteer for the town or to merely express themselves freely without fear of being ridiculed, and we hope to do this with the support of the entire Select Board. As a show of support, we request formal acknowledgement of the misinformation as well as the mistreatment of candidates. Respectfully, Dr. D. So, last meeting, after reviewing it, we find that Mr. Duggan violated our code of conduct, which was adopted in 2018. And I'll recite the 3 things that he violated. Be well informed concerning the duties and responsibility of the committee. Number 2, remember that you represent the entire community at all times. You are held to a higher standard of discourse as a representative of the town than you would be as a private citizen. And 3rd, treat members of your committee and the public with respect despite differences of opinion. Matt, do you have any comments you'd like to make at this time?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think maybe what I had said at the last meeting when I was questioning the candidates may have been taken out of context. I asked if the candidate was in agreement with the NAACP's approach earlier this year when they contacted all the media outlets in Boston, TV stations, the Boston Globe, and basically kind of tarnished every single resident in Danvers. I wanted to know if the candidate supported that approach. It's an approach that's taken by social justice warriors, that the means justify the ends, and we saw that when this group attacked Sergeant Baldessari and tarnished and his reputation as part of the hockey incident without sufficient facts, just based on hearsay. They also tarnished the Danvers Police Department when they disagreed with the redacted report that the police department spent a considerable amount of time on. They attacked the school superintendent, Lisa Dana. They attacked the school committee members. And so we don't need people like that. You talked about respect. We saw during those hearings that the school committee held, we saw people stand up and say things that were based on hearsay. There was not evidence because the person that reported it did so anonymously. And so based on what we heard and what we knew was not entirely accurate, I believe. And so for me to ask if this group was going to, or these members of this NAACP were going to join our committee and kind of bring that dialogue, we don't really need a bully pulpit for them to proclaim their approach. And so I think that those questions that I asked, they were legitimate. I heard from people that thought that they were appropriate at the time, and I don't regret them. And for the rest of this board to sanction me or censor me, I mean, I'm free to speak what I think, and I don't believe that I was disrespectful. There were questions that were legitimate, and so again, this is kind of a recurring pattern where I'm violating some code of conduct that I had no input to. And so, you know, it is what it is. If we can agree to disagree, and that's basically my approach, and really that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Matt. You were given an opportunity to meet with the entire board and a mediator to review the code of conduct and how we pick the chair. You refused to attend. You said you didn't want to have anything to do with this board outside of a public hearing. Unfortunately,
That's not true. I couldn't get off from work. I had to work that day.
Matt, you made many non-factual statements that imply that you weren't actually, hadn't actually spoken with the ad hoc committee members about why they volunteered their time and what their concerns and goals were.
No, they're not non-factual.
Most importantly, the way that Select Board Member Duggan questioned Joanna seemed intended to give him the floor to share his opinions about the NAACP, rather than to learn about how this black woman's experience in Danvers could bring value. Both those candidates were qualified professionals who were engaged in the reputable volunteer work and are raising families in our town. If the questions they received had come from a place of curiosity and good intent, it could have been an opportunity to set an example for the community. The damage is done, and the unwelcoming impact of Select Board Member Duggan's words was felt not only by 2 women of color trying to volunteer their time to our town, but also by many in the community. Matt, your inability to engage in respectful conversations with people of different experience and backgrounds causes me to declare that you will not be called upon to ask questions of future volunteers before us. You may only pose questions in writing to the chair prior to our meetings that regard citizen volunteers. With a consensus of the board, I would like to offer an apology to the candidates for appointment and acknowledge their mistreatment with non-factual statements made by Mr. Duggan, a member of this board.
What are the non-factual statements, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Duggan, I'm asking the board for their consensus. David?
Yes.
Thank you. Gardner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Undecided.
Thank you. So we do offer our apologies. We do think that the candidates were mistreated. The candidate for the ZBA was also rather mistreated prior to this, so this is not the first time. And that, as long as I'm chair, you won't be allowed to question volunteers.
Legitimate questions.
That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
If you'll allow comments?
I do.
Thank you. I have to apologize. I was remiss. I was remiss in not speaking up immediately that night. This is a pattern, as Mr. Duggan has noted. This is a pattern, but it's not a pattern of him having a alternate view on a decision that we're making as a board. It's not a pattern of having an opposing view on tax rates or other actions that we take as a board. This is a pattern of his behavior on the board. He's demonstrated more than once his disrespect for citizens. He admonishes volunteers who come before us, and not just in this case, and he abuses the committees that we've appointed. He brings up his personal axes to grind at every opportunity. That happened in the last meeting. A candidate was asked about something they put on their application, their association with North Shore NAACP, and it was a fair question the first time he asked it. He asked the question, it was answered. For whatever reason that didn't satisfy him, he asked the same question again that was, again, answered. That person was not part of the North Shore NAACP that made the decisions on the method of communication that they decided to take. He then went into a description or a discussion that even tonight he surrounds as if it is a fact. These are his opinions. He said even tonight, we saw, they attacked. We don't need people like that, and says it from a position of this seat, which I take great responsibility for. I've been here 17 years, and I respect this role. And he takes it, and he states it as if it's a board fact. It is not a board fact. I don't think the things he thinks. Not often. We agree on some issues. In this case, not. This is not a court of law. And when he states that people got up and said things, they were asked their feelings. Feelings aren't necessarily fact. Feelings are feelings and should be respected and heard. That's how we change. So I'm sorry, I apologize that I was remiss in not immediately saying something. I consider volunteers the lifeblood of this town. They bring a fresh perspective and a willingness to serve, and we certainly can't replicate that with hired people from the town. We need volunteers in this town, and they should be respected. People we appoint to boards should be able to conduct their board business without oversight at every single meeting by a select board member. and we've had that discussion. We've worked, both chairs, serving during the time that Mr. Duggan has been a member, elected by the people. We've worked to help him understand the norms, the precedences, the procedures, the policies of this board. He chooses to ignore many of those. We actually set up we hired a facilitator to walk through the code of conduct so that if there's anything that should be modified, changed, updated, we would all have a say in that code of conduct. He refused. He initially refused, he acquiesced, and then he refused at the last moment too. People should be treated with dignity and respect, and I feel and am offering my own personal apology that I don't support, obviously, his statements, but that I did not speak more fervently. It's a balance between respecting the board and respecting its members and respecting the public. And I'll take it to heart that I should be respecting the public first. So I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. David?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Maureen?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay. That concludes that. Unfortunately, it's a difficult situation, but we have no recourse other than to censor him somehow and restrict his ability to converse with volunteers, citizens. Dee, did you want to make a comment representing your board, or you said? No, you don't have to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not much. I think the letter that I did send all of you speaks for itself. It's really unfortunate that we are where we are. I commend the rest of the board for speaking out and acknowledging what actually transpired. And we at the HRC will continue to work very hard to make our town a welcoming town. I say very often, I'm a triple minority. I'm black, I'm immigrant, and English is not my first language. It's extremely hard to be able to stand at this podium and utter a single word. And when you try to do that, and you are made feel like you don't belong, after you've given all you can to try to raise your kids in such a beautiful town, and coming from leadership, is extremely painful. It's extremely painful. And there are many other residents who are unable to get on this podium and do that. So I commend the board for what you do, but we still got a long way to go. And we will continue to do that work until we see it through. So thank you very much.
Thank you. At this time, I'll ask for an approval of the minutes of December 6, 2022.
So moved?
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. At this time on the agenda, we allow new public business, something that's not on the agenda, has already been addressed. Anybody has any new public business? No? Okay, hearing none. We'll go to item 3. A public hearing will be held on the application of the Modern Butcher, DBA The Modern Butcher, 36 Maple Street, Warren Means, manager, for a common vicular's license at that location. Is Mr. Means here?
Yes, sir.
Welcome. Please introduce yourself to the folks at home.
Hello,
and tell us
everyone.
what you want.
My name is Warren Means, and this is Lisa Nichols, and we own The Modern Butcher. We currently operate in Newburyport. We are coming up on our 4th year of operation, and we have decided to move our business to Danvers.
You're vacating Newburyport?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh.
okay.
Yes, we're leaving there and coming here.
Well, thank you. Okay. So tell us about how the business operates.
Sure. So my background isn't in the restaurant industry or any food service at all. I come from the medical field. I was 10 years in pathology. So I have built-in, laboratory. Everything's very strict, very perfect all the time, and that's how we choose to run our business. A lot of documentation. So it was a really easy transition for me to transfer from that to what we're doing right now. And like I said, it's kind of how we operate our business now, and it makes it easy for everyone, for us, for the health department, for anyone that's trying to work with us, and it's a nice way to do things, and I don't think we're gonna ever change. We strive for perfection always. She's restaurant industry
Yep.
background.
So I'm born and raised Danvers, so it's like a homecoming. coming back home. We opened in Newburyport, so he's originally from Wakefield. We lived in Stoneham. We sold the house to do this. So we kind of took all the money and built our dream shop. We outgrew it way faster than we ever thought that we would. So our little 1,200 square foot storefront kind of outgrew pretty quickly. So we started looking and kind of always had our eye on Danvers. Me growing up, I mean, we're now opening where I used to have chicken fingers at Supreme's and pizza at Rocco's. So we saw the spot where the old Dunkin' Donuts was on Maple Street, kind of started the progress, and yeah.
It's
Here we
funny
are.
because we used to drive by it every day after we dropped our daughter off at her grandmother's house, and we were always like, oh, that's a really good spot. I wonder what will go in there. And sure enough, it ended up being us. So what we're a whole animal butcher. All of our meat comes from within 150 miles of the shop. The farmers themselves bring us the animals, the cow, the pig, the lamb, chickens, everything. We process everything ourselves. We make our sausage. We make one sandwich a day currently is what we're doing right now. So we can make and execute one perfectly every single day. If you know about us, you know about the roast beef on Saturdays, and that's a whole mess in itself. But that's how we do things. Everything's made in-house. We have full control over everything. The two of us are in the shop at all operating hours every day, whenever we're open. It's not that we don't trust people. It's just we're perfectionists and control freaks, and that's just how we are.
Our biggest thing, though, with building the shop, we found kind of there wasn't a place to be able to buy meat that, one, had full transparency, that, two, there was no middleman. So most commodity shops and grocery stores are getting their meat from multiple distribution companies. So we're getting it from a single farmer. And depending on where it is from that week, one of the greatest farmers that we have does all their own processing. So there actually is no hands in between. And we wanted that direct from farm to consumer. And that's really what we strive for. If you come in on a Thursday at lunchtime, you're going to see that cow come through the door. Seeing full transparency in everything that is happening with our shop. We strive for.
Madam Clerk, is the paperwork in order?
The paperwork's in order.
Marvelous. And what are your hours of operation and
So
days?
currently we are Tuesday to Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. I think with the move, we'd be looking to open on Sunday for a short day. We used to do it in Newburyport, 11 to 2. I think we're going to implement those hours, 11 to 2 on Sunday. So Tuesday to Sunday.
Okay, thank you. Questions on the board, Maureen?
I think it's wonderful you're coming back home and, driving by, and bringing your businesses. That's what we want. We want businesses in Danvers. We want our town to have as many businesses as possible. And
We're already recruiting other people to come.
good, good. Well,
We
welcome.
are.
I'm very excited for you. Good
Yeah,
luck.
no, I mean, just seeing kind of the changes in downtown I went everywhere as a kid, and I feel like there's so much opportunity now for downtown to bring back in those mom and pop shops that have left and really, really focus on local and, not only are we local, but we're buying from local.
Right, we want that buy local. Good luck. I'm so happy for
Thank
you.
you.
Welcome home.
David?
Thank you, Dan. Is it like a butchery you sell meats?
Yes.
Like a boneless leg of lamb?
Yes. Yes.
Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, great addition to the square, and wish you success. Can you just talk a little bit about the layout of the store, seating, and
Absolutely.
is it kind of a retail where people will purchase items and leave? And also, it sounds like with sandwiches, people will be able to hang out.
Yeah, so differently than what we were doing in Newburyport, we decided to have a couple seats inside the shop. So there'll be 6 along the wall, 4 along the side wall, and then 3 in front of where the case is. We'll also have 4 tables outside with 2 seats at each table, and that's it. We'll be back next month to apply for a beer wine license, which we'll be looking forward to trying to do this. But yeah, seating will be there, but nothing for long periods of time, especially with the rate that we turn through people. And it's just a sandwich. It doesn't take very long to eat a sandwich.
Right.
And we're kind of notorious for having a bit of a line. So we, try and get things through people as fast as possible.
All right. So you have great Yelp reviews, so I'm sure you'll be a
I think
big
the
hit.
Yelp reviews are pretty solid, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great.
We
So,
try hard.
Again, I wish you success.
I appreciate
you.
that very much.
Gardner?
No, I can't wait. Newberry's loss is Danvers' gain, so very excited for this. And I look forward to the venture. All my other questions were answered during the deliberations. Thank you.
When you plan on opening?
We're looking to March, beginning of March, just to give us enough time to not rush through everything.
So you'll be before us for liquor license prior to that?
Yes.
Next January.
January
17th.
meeting.
Very good. Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Anyone in the public, any comments, questions? Please, Tim.
Oh, yep.
Tim Donahue, Precinct 4 meeting member. I just want to say I, for one, am extremely excited that you guys are coming. I do have a couple of comments, at least one comment. Knowing the reputation and the following
For
of
the
your...
board, please.
Oh, excuse me. So knowing the reputation of the following of the roast beef sandwich, I do highly recommend that in advertising or anything that they do when they describe their shop, they do recommend parking areas within town, because there's not a lot of parking on the street right in front of that shop. There are throughout town that are within very short walking distances, and I just can see that becoming an issue if it's not addressed and advertised in advance.
Good, thank you.
Okay, but welcome, thank you.
Anyone else? What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the application
No,
as
it's
presented.
public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the application as presented.
And I second it.
Any comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations. The board will vote to accept gifts in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A. Mr. Town Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It looks like if your packets were similar to mine, you received the gift that was accepted at the last meeting. But the third page of that is actually the gift that Police Chief Jamie Lovell is here to speak about tonight. So I'll turn it over to the chief to talk about a very generous gift that was recently given to the police department.
Welcome, Chief.
Good evening. Approximately a week ago, we got a check from a biomed for the sum of $5,000 as a donation towards the Danvers Police Department DARE program to do work with DARE program and community outreach. Spoke to the president of biomed, and he was a great supporter of us over the past few years. And as the company changes, he wanted to make sure we had at least one last donation to the police department.
Okay. Questions, Gardner?
Nope, no questions. Thankful for the donation.
Maureen?
I think it's great, the donation, and I also heard that that company got bought by Johnson & Johnson.
Correct.
So that's good for us, as long as they're staying in Danvers.
Matt?
All set.
David?
Nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What's the will of the board?
I move we accept the donation with an appropriate letter of thanks.
Second.
Okay. Questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
So, number 5, Senator Lovely's office reached out and said, what time will we start in the airport? I said 7 o'clock-ish. But I see you here, Joan, thank you. There was a clipboard going around. Can we bring that forwards, please? That's good. Thanks, appreciate it. Thanks for your help. That's okay. Yep, good, thanks. So, no, we're here to hear from the public, with public comments on the activities at Light Beverly Municipal Airport. We've gone through a stretch with a manager that really wasn't interested in the citizens' concerns or the airport itself, basically. They were more concerned with, if I may be blunt, building their resume and building the airport. That person resigned, and now we have an opportunity to give comment and even constructive criticism to the mayor of Beverly as he goes through his interview process to hire a new manager. If we had waited till January, that deal might have been made and you wouldn't have had the opportunity to speak and be heard. No, it's really what we're here for, to hear from you, what it is you'd like to see in the airport. Criticism is allowed, no personal comments, please. And I appreciate those people that signed here. I'm going to kind of pick names at random. I don't know, Joan, you want to speak first, last? I'll give you the opportunity. Pick your spot. Senator Lovely.
It's Joan. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to go first. I do have another meeting that's starting at 7 o'clock, a Beverly issue on Zoom, so thank you so much. I just want to thank the board for engaging, for having this meeting tonight, for engaging the city of Beverly as the city has jurisdiction to hire the next manager at the airport. It's very important, very critical, especially given the issues that the neighbors, many of who are here tonight, have expressed to both Representative Kearns and I, and Rep. Spiliotis before he left office, about the impact of the airport. I grew up in Beverly and Raymond Farms. I remember that airport and thought fondly of it then, actually, with the occasional planes that went over. My father was an aircraft engineer at GE, so he taught us about, as planes were going that way to the Beverly Airport and that way to Logan, we had a lot of air traffic over the house, but I learned a lot about it. But it wasn't an impact then, when I was a child, but it certainly is an impact most recently in the last 2 or 3 years, it seems. There's been a big uptick of business and flight schools, et cetera. A lot of people want to get their pilot's license. That is wonderful. But how can the airport be a better neighbor, especially on the Danvers side, which seems to have the most impact, although Beverly residents and Wenham residents are impacted as well. So I just want to say thank you to the board for engaging the public, for having this dialogue, the opportunity to be able to express those concerns to the city of Beverly, who will choose, again, under their jurisdiction, the next manager of the airport. And both myself and Representative Kearns, who will likely speak next, want to continue to work with the neighborhood and with the town to be able to, again, mitigate these impacts and have the airport be a good neighbor as they have in the past. We have engaged with the board, the airport commission, and I do think that they want to also be a part of, the reinstilling the good neighbor policy, so that, again, mitigate these impacts, lessen the impacts of an airport surrounded by mostly residential neighborhoods. There's that noise issue, but there's also a newer issue that's been raised again by the neighbors with the leaded gasoline. And I know that Congressman Moulton's office is represented here too by Norm Abbott, who will probably speak at some point and give you an update. But we are working very hard together. So thank you for the opportunity to be able to address you tonight. And thank you for your strong interest in protecting your residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally, do you want to go now or later?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the board for your attention. I don't want to take time from neighbors. I think Senator Lovely and I have been listening and very impressed with the efforts of this group to bring their concerns forward in a very constructive manner. The only thing I would sort of report on is I had a very, very good conversation with Mayor Cahill of Beverly. And I feel very hopeful that the mayor is paying attention and sees the change in manager as a huge opportunity. I also want to thank our town manager, Steve Bartha, for convening people. And I know that the board had reservations at one time about whether there could be any role for the board. And we're all just kind of at the mercy of some of these regulations. But I do believe that we're making progress and getting the attention of the airport commission. I know that Aaron is working hard in his role as the Danvers representative. So let's just keep at it. I thank all of these good folks for their efforts, and I thank all of you for listening. And I thank Norm Abbott. I'm going to put him, when you see fit, Norm is going to fill us in on the federal picture. So thank you, and
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Norma, do you want to speak now and represent? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Norman Abbott. I'm with Congressman Moulton's office. I am here today hopefully to provide a little bit of background for folks on some of the issues that I know the neighbors are concerned of. I, too, have had the pleasure of working with many of them that are here this evening. I know recently there's been a lot of concern about some of the lead fuel issue. My hope is that with the EPA currently investigating this matter, they should have a report due in early 2023, which would then hopefully allow for some further action on that part. There is a plan to roll out and to phase out leaded fuel eventually, but this is a potential plan to actually expedite that process. As a regard to the airport noise, I know Congressman Moulton has been working with the Quiet Skies Caucus. That's a group of lawmakers that are pushing to make sure that noise and air pollution from airports are addressed. There's been a big push by that caucus to make sure that the stakeholders that live in areas closer to airports like Beverly, are heard in the policymaking process and making sure that their concerns are met. That's a big push of that committee, and they will continue to do so. He's also signed on to legislation that would give the airports the ability to bar flights after 10 p.m. and before 7 a.m., which is something that currently doesn't exist by law. That's not something that has been signed into law yet, but is legislation that he has co-sponsored and could potentially move forward. The big push going forward as well is to also get some additional decibel it's very scientific, and I apologize if I'm not saying everything correct here, but address some of the decibel concerns. Currently, there's an average 65 decibel rating, which would allow for these airports to neighbors to apply for funding that would allow them to noise-proof their house. The Quiet Skies Caucus is working with the FAA to make sure that to reevaluate those decibel levels, so that in hopes that funding could be used for noise abatement for folks that are severely impacted by some of these air noises. And just wanted to say that I'm here to answer any questions that the board may have about some of these federal programs. And if I don't have answers for you now, happy to follow up with Steve or with Chair Bennett.
Norman, thank you. But phasing out lead fuel eventually doesn't tell me there's a sense of urgency. I think we need a different adjective, if you will, for getting rid of lead fuel.
Correct. And so there's the Eagle agency within the FAA that's working to even move that even faster than the 2035, I think is what the initial deadline was. This work that the EPA has taken up more recently is really to expedite that process. If they come back, my understanding is finding that it is overly harmful, that will allow them and the FAA to work together to put a limit on what those standards can be, is my understanding.
Norman, thank you for coming tonight. Are you going to stay around and listen?
Yes, I will stay around and listen.
Then we'll come back to you towards the end, if we may.
Please.
Thank you very much. Chip Sutter? Chip, are you here? You want to speak? You okay? Thank you. But thank you for attending. Mark Anderson? I'm all set. You all set? Thank you. Ryan? All set, thank you. Yes. Point of order?
Mr. Chairman, I was just wondering if it's possible that Aaron Henry or the town manager
He'll
gives
speak afterwards.
Excuse me?
He'll speak afterwards.
No, I know, but I just want to know, well, it would make more sense if they just gave us, they're going to give us an update. They talked to the mayor of Beverly. We want to know what input they had.
Okay.
So this way here makes our decision on what to speak on and what to talk about.
Okay,
That's the reason why I'd rather have them go up front so we know what we're doing.
Originally, Aaron was going to speak first, but I thought this was for you folks to speak. But if you'd like to hear from our representative, that's fine if Mr. Henry's available.
The reason being is because there's a lot of ways to cover. There's a lot of things to cover here. There's just not
There is.
one. We got noise, we got jets,
I know.
we got pollution, we got all kinds of stuff, and it's been going on for too long. So we got to get it squared away, honestly. And in my honest opinion, I think it would be nice if we understood what's going on and what's taking place, so we know where we stand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Betancourt. That's
Thank you.
Good thought. Aaron, you got the floor.
Excuse me.
Are you sick?
Thank you. Good evening.
I am Aaron Henry. I'm the Director of Land Use and Community Services for the town. I also have the pleasure of being one of the town's representative on the Airport Commission. We have a vacancy right now, recently vacated by Mr. Matt Mosier, who's been on with me for the last couple of years. Since our last appearance before the Select Board, which I believe was in early September, at that meeting we discussed several action items. I want to say we discussed about 7 or 8 action items that I was going to talk to my fellow commissioners about. The big one that was new to us at that time that we have since acted on is the supports to retire leaded fuel, leaded gasoline. The commission took that position at its November meeting. So again, the commission has supported that. We are also now in the process of actively reviewing the noise abatement and good neighbor policies. So we've talked about those at the last 2 meetings, and this last meeting in December, edits were put on the table, and we expect that the full commission to have a more robust conversation about that in January. The process for that, again, we want it to move expeditiously, but we didn't set a drop dead date because, again, we want to make sure that we're doing the outreach necessary to make sure that we're hearing from all stakeholders as we go through and finalizing those edits. So again, my hope is that this isn't a 12-month process, but I don't want to say it's a 30-day process if it needs to be a 90-day process. So we're moving as expeditiously as we can through that process and expect the next several meetings to be discussing those policies quite heavily. Some of the other issues that we've talked about really focused on understanding the data around the users of the airport, and those are things that kind of have to flow from once we establish our policies and priorities. And again, I think I'll let Mr. Bartha chime in on their conversation with the mayor, but again, those were largely focused around making sure that the commission establishes clear priorities around what we expect our users on the field to be doing, and we think that that'll set the tone for hiring of the next manager and making sure that that manager understands that this is really the wish of the commission, that we focus on being a better neighbor than we have the last several years.
Thank you. Steve, do you want to make a comment?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I had a very productive conversation with the mayor. Similar to what Representative Kern said, there is an openness right now. I think the mayor recognizes an opportunity. I discussed with him that we were having this meeting tonight, and that the chair viewed it as an opportunity for the community to share input in terms of what the expectations and hopes are on a moving forward basis. There are some vacancies on the Beverly side as well, so they have some reappointments to make. But certainly the mayor spoke pretty fluently in terms of the frustrations and the concerns that have been expressed by many of the people in this room over the last couple of years. And he also views the next appointment as key in terms of starting to address those concerns and sort of reset things, which in my role in 8 years, it really became acute in the last couple of years. So he also wants to see things stabilize. And we offered to help in any way that we can in that process, and he expressed an interest in having our fire chief and myself involved in some way, shape, or form as they move through that process. So, and I know I believe it's been advertised now, so I think that this is a timely meeting, and the feedback from this meeting will be summarized and provided to the commission and the mayor's office.
Thank you. Back to the public. Pat Fitzgerald.
Hi, I'm Pat Fitzgerald. I live on Lafayette Ave, which is down in the Beaver Park area. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, when the airport does these touch and goes, they come off the runway, they do a giant oval, and then they do their touch and goes into the airport and keep going around and around. Our house, our neighbor's house, is right underneath that loop where they turn, which means that we hear the noise a good minute, minute and a half for every plane that goes over. Sometimes they have 5, 6, I've counted as many as 8 planes in the air, one right after the other. So we have had days in the summer when we cannot use our yard at all. We have a pool. We will not allow the grandkids in it on those days because it's a safety issue. We can't yell and they can't hear us. I've heard comments about, well, you shouldn't have moved near an airport. I didn't move near an airport. I grew up in town. I lived closer to the airport before. I'm now 3.5 miles away from the airport, and the noise is horrible. I mean, we're paying taxes on land that we can't use. We literally cannot read a book out there. We can't talk to our grandchildren out there. We actually have to be quiet when the planes go over because you can't hear each other talk. It's gotten so much worse in the last 2 or 3 years. It's just been horrendous. And I am hoping that the new airport manager does address some of these issues. I don't understand why almost all of the touch and goes come off that same runway and are over Danvers, when we're told that it all depends on wind. But the wind isn't always blowing in that direction. It's ridiculous. The tower just seems to do whatever they want to do. They don't seem to go by wind at all as to where these planes come and go. I have looked into the issues about having, your house soundproofed or whatever. I did read up on all that. Not only, I live in a split level, so we basically live on the top level. Our windows rattle when these planes go overhead. Sometimes they're rattling all day, all night. It's not just that. It's you can't soundproof your yard. You can't soundproof an area where you used to go and sit and read a book or where you want to play with your grandkids. How are you going to soundproof that? You can't. I don't want the airport, and I don't expect the airport to stop what they're doing and lose money. No one wants that. But to be able to limit these flights a bit, like maybe not have as many planes in the air at one time, maybe just a couple in that loop so that you at least can breathe in between. It just seems like if we can't use our yards, why can't we get an abatement? Because we're not able to use our property. Something more has to be done for the outside, not just the inside of your house. Yeah, we have windows that rattle. We have some that need to be replaced. They go overhead. I've called the airport and was told that they're flying. I complained because they were flying so low. We were told they had to fly around 1,000 feet. They've been flying at like 600 feet over our house. We were told it was to conserve fuel. Why is that acceptable? I mean, aren't they supposed to be 1,000 feet? Why is it acceptable that suddenly they can go way down? It's just, they don't follow any rules here. But anyway, those are my issues. I do hope that these can be addressed. I don't know how you're going to soundproof a yard. But I think something needs to be done to stop maybe not having quite so many in the air at once, or possibly have them go off a different runway once in a while. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Rocket.
Thank you, Sharon. Good evening. My name is Brian Rocket. I live on Juniper Ridge Road, which is just off of Wenham Street, down the street from Mr. Bartha. I've been there for 25 years or so. I'm not opposed to airports. My first job, my first dollar, I got from working at Robbins Airport down in Collins Street, cleaning the bugs off the airplanes, the leading edge. So I understand the people, individual pilots getting training, needing to do those touch and goes, but something has changed. My hearing is not getting any better with all this age, but they're louder. And it's sometimes the touch and goes are annoying, but there are certain airplanes that are just like those certain motorcycles. There's something different about those planes. Now, whether it's the propeller or the exhaust, I don't know, but they're loud. But there doesn't seem to be any recourse. You can't say, oh, I saw that guy, I got his license plate, I'm going to turn him in. So I guess that's one of the items specifics to the agenda. The other item I have, I was home, working from home during the pandemic. Apparently there's a helicopter school at the airport. When the traffic copter goes by, you can set your clock at 6 a.m. He goes right over. Fast, it's kind of loud, but it's over in a few seconds. He comes home at the same time at 6 p.m. Okay. All right. Oh, he comes home at 8:30. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not there. Anyway, yes. But whoever's doing the training on the helicopters is flying low. They're flying right down Princeton Street. They're basically hovering. They're going very slow over these houses. And I'm working from home, trying to be on the air. I can't even go in my basement. I can't escape that noise. So it just seems to be, by the way, if you think about the map, There's all kinds of parts of Wenham that are just fields and woods and you know, swamp. I mean, I guess they're probably using us as reference points. They can look to a certain street sign or something to turn around because they're low enough they can read those street signs. So that's my point. There's got to be some way we can do something about it. I'm not against having an airport. It's been there longer than I have. But I think there's certain things we can do within reason. So thanks.
Thank you. Elizabeth? Elizabeth? Excuse me, sir. I didn't call on you.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Graham Jastrzemski. I live at 22 Lafayette Ave. So I believe my neighbor Pat spoke about many of our mutual concerns, especially about the touch and goes turning around at our spot and just the way that Beaver Park neighborhood is being kind of down on the hill. It really echoes as well. So we really are getting that property, that elongated noise. My father and I had installed triple pane windows when we first moved here in 2017. I can still hear the planes, and I have had to invest in over $200 worth of noise canceling headphones. I'm a therapist by profession. I work out of my home, and in order to see and hear my clients, I have to use headphones, which means I've had an increase in ear infections. I've had an increase in headaches from the noise balance of the cancellation headphones. And the other thing I would say besides that with the touch and goes is the noise reports. So Patty and I were on the noise subcommittee for the airport subcommittee. We were not notified that the meetings had stopped. And one of the things we found out during those meetings is that the noise complaints don't go anywhere. So I would really encourage whoever the next commissioner is, that they actually read and listen to those noise complaints. We're doing our part to follow their procedures and put these complaints in, including looking up the serial numbers of the planes. And to what you spoke of, there are repeat offenders, and I can tell you there are probably 2 or 3 planes that I end up reporting every time they come over our house.
Thank you. Bob Barrows?
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to comment, Mr. Chairman and the board tonight. Most of my comments are going to focus on the lead issue, leaded gas. Recently, there was a hearing held by the U.S. Committee of Oversight and Reform Subcommittee on the Environment. The hearing discusses how leaded aviation fuel is polluting the air and exposing individuals who live in neighborhoods, such as Danvers, in close proximity to general aviation airports, such as Beverly Airport, to lead poisoning. Virtually all, if not all, of the planes we've been complaining about that have been causing the excessive noise flying over our homes at very low altitudes the past 3 years are single piston planes that use the leaded aviation fuel discussed during the hearing. We've been voicing concern about the intolerable noise these planes create as a result of the constant touch and go activity practiced by them every day. Now we become aware that these planes are putting us all at risk of lead poisoning by polluting the air we breathe and dropping leaded fuel exhaust on the yards where we work and play. Lead emitted from operations at Beverly Airport is likely to be deposited in neighborhoods due to the fact that one of the largest uses at Beverly is flight training, with several flight training programs operating directly out of the airport. Flight training using leaded gas-powered aircraft is especially dangerous to surrounding communities because training pilots often make numerous takeoffs and landings, circle the airport in a pattern at low altitudes, and operate closer to the airport. As a result, the lead and other pollutants from such operations are more likely to be deposited in the airport's surrounding communities. Lead can cause severe and irreversible harm to the nervous, cardiovascular, immune, and reproductive systems of people living in surrounding areas. Lead is also linked to an increased risk of cancer and death. Children are particularly susceptible to harm from lead poisoning. The CDC and EPA have determined that any level of lead in the blood leads to adverse health effects, and there is no safe level of lead in the blood. We are extremely concerned about what's happening to our homes and neighborhood and the lack of concern by those managing and using the airport. On its website, Beverly Airport states that they value their neighboring community and wish to maintain good relations, and their goal is always to be considerate and concerned about the neighboring community. Please tell me how flying their planes over our rooftops over 100 times a day, often at as little as 15 to 30 seconds apart, creating intolerable noise and putting their abutting neighborhoods at risk of something as dangerous as lead poisoning, shows consideration and concern for their neighbors. They operate the airport with little to no regard for Danvers residents living in their neighboring community. We are alarmed at this newest revelation, and something needs to be done immediately to curtail the daily constant touch and go activity that occurs over our very densely populated Danvers neighborhoods. I've lived in my home for over 35 years, and as I've said many times previously, for the first 32 years, our neighborhood rarely ever heard or saw any of the single piston engine planes that have been bombarding us for the past 3 years. Beverly Airport needs to go back to the good neighbor policies and practices that were previously in place up until 3 years ago, and resurrect them so the intolerable noise and risk of dangerous lead poisoning is curtailed for the sake of our neighbors and citizens. We cannot wait for an alternative unleaded fuel source to be mandated. And if the constant noise and fear associated with the risk of lead poisoning was not enough, 2 plane crashes occurred at the airport within 5 weeks of each other recently. With these most recent crashes, the increased number of touch and goes are occurring over homes in the most densely populated areas of Danvers, and the increased number of flight training centers and clubs at Beverly Airport, I can't help but think that it's just a matter of time before a plane crashes into a neighborhood. Something needs to be done about the activity going on at this airport. Banning the sale of leaded fuel at the airport and reinstating strict adherence to the Beverly Airport Good Neighbor policy that was created several years ago is a good start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bellows. Sam and Marie?
Hi, I'm Sam Rapp. I live on 83 Burley Street. I abut the airport, and not much more you can say that the noise level has increased so much over the past few years, and it just doesn't seem like the Beverly Airport has any, that they want to be a good neighbor. The touch and goes are every 5 minutes, and the noise levels just keeps increasing. So it would be nice if they could go back to what they were doing before.
Thank you. Katie Highland? Thank you. Mr. Betancourt?
Okay, I'll try to be a good boy and get everything squared away here. Now, the helicopters, okay, they're talking about the helicopters. It's sad that in Danvers, we are getting the brunt of everything. Every single thing that comes out of that airport is being done in Danvers. Okay, they stage over at the Liberty Tree Mall. Metro One does, okay? Every morning and every afternoon, and in the afternoon, he stages there depending on where he's going to go. And if he doesn't stage at the Liberty Tree Mall, he stages over up at Ferncroft, okay, on the Danvers side. What he does, he hovers in the air over there for quite a while if he gets a call to go somewhere or whatever. So that's what they're hearing, okay? Another thing about helicopters, I just learned the other day. I explained to Mr. Henry at the last meeting, off the record, I told him of a situation that I heard. One of the tower guys was telling the guy to do some maneuvers in a helicopter. He told him to do it on the Danvers side, basically. And the guy says, we're not supposed to make noise over there. That's what the guy told him, the helicopter guy. He told him, no, you do it over there. Well, come this Saturday, they were on runway 34, which, that gives us a little bit of relief, which is not spectacular. So I go outside to hang some Christmas stuff up, and I'm hearing this noise. What the hell is this noise? So I got in the truck, and I went all the way to the airport to see what's going on. Well, There's a helicopter over there doing maneuvers on runway 27, right in Danvers, right off of Burley Street and Bradford Road, okay? Going about 10 feet off the ground, up, down, and around. And I was just watching it. I forgot to bring my phone, otherwise I would have taped it because he didn't come up on the radar. He wasn't high enough to come up on the radar because a lot of the stuff you can catch. So the problem here is the Beverly Airport is tucking it to Danvers, okay? There is no, I'm telling you, we are getting bombarded. The way those runways are and everything else, we need someone to stand up. We need the FAA to come in here, do an impact study to find out what is going on over there, okay? I don't understand, really, honestly, how they got awarded that $21 million to expand that airport with no impact study. I cannot believe it. I really can't. Now, did the town of Danvers get any information from them on an impact study? Did they give you a release? I mean, they said they did some kind of noise study. Did you guys get a copy of that or something?
Aaron, is that, do you have an answer for that?
We want an impact study.
Okay, continue, Tony.
Okay, well, we need an impact study, honestly, okay? We have to, because that airport is really giving it to us. I mean, look, all these people are here, we're not making things up. Something has changed over there, and they're not taking care of us. They're tucking it to us, okay? That's the sad part, okay? I don't know how to explain it in any more ways. I mean, I can give you scenarios. I can prove things to you. I go to the meetings, they want me to prove things to them. How many times can you prove to them over and over again there's a problem?
Tony, we believe everything you all
I understand.
tell us.
And
We
I-
all
look-
hear it, and this is the opportunity to give the mayor of Beverly an earful.
And I appreciate you, Mr. Bennett, for really helping us. It's about time the town of Danvers is starting to look into this and help us out. I'm hoping they stay with it and really help us out because we need the help.
Thank you. Beth Osgood?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Beth Osgood, and I'm a lifetime resident of Danvers, born in Hunt Hospital. In 1998, I purchased my first house in Danvers on Burley Street. 30 days later, our backyards were clear cut. Clear cut. My husband sent me a video of these machines that supposedly came from the rainforest, which took a tree, cut it at its source, and shred it in 13 seconds. It went through all of our backyards for me and all my neighbors. I was lucky enough that I had a fence up, and several trees on my property weren't taken. I was much luckier than the rest of my neighbors. The neighbors got together, tried to fight Beverly City Hall, and we failed. Nothing helped, nothing improved. We just got told that all the greenery will grow back eventually. Fast forward 20 years. 2018, Beverly Airport took down trees on my property. I was told in an email, which I have, that they were to be trimmed, not taken. I was on vacation in California, and they were taken to the root, broke my fence, damaged an automobile, for none of which I have been compensated for. The next storm, 2 trees that were next to that very large tree fell down. When I told the airport commissioner that that was our last defense, were those big trees, she told me, "Don't be ridiculous, a plane will never crash into your property." 4 years later, I got that call. A plane has crashed on your property. And I drove home, panic-stricken, not knowing who, what, where, what happened. Did it hit my house? And luckily it didn't. And luckily there was no fatalities. It hit the remaining trees. The airport hired somebody to come and do some soil contamination. We all saw it come out of the plane. We saw it dripping as they moved the plane. And even people from the airport said to me, "I can't believe that these contamination reports came up, that there's not enough in the ground
to remove. At that time, they also cut part of my fence, and my yard between the two the two fences could no longer let my dog out. We now had to put her on a leash every single time. It's been 33 months, and the damage to my property has not been met. Not one single dollar have I received from the insurance company of the airport for the damage that was done to my property. So I know the senators put in a good word for the mayor and hoping to have somebody in the airport that maybe could act differently. But I've really, really lost faith that Beverly Airport could ever be a good neighbor to us, because they certainly haven't been a good neighbor to me. That's it.
Thank you. I apologize, I'm trying to read Grenier on Burley Street.
Yeah.
Please, so you can go speak if you'd like. Okay, that's fine, that's okay, but thank you for coming tonight. Joseph. Thank you for being patient.
Thank you for hearing us out. I'm Joe Rinaldi. I live on Anthony Lane. I've been very interested in hearing all the comments. Of course, my good neighbor, Bob Barrows, already said most of what I was going to say. So, but I will repeat a few of the most important things, and that is that I too have lived in Danvers over 35 years, as my neighbor John Costanza and a few other neighbors. I came from Revere, where oftentimes, being so close to Boston, whatever, you could hear the din of the city. Sometimes you could hear the airport, you know, but I slept like a baby. So then we moved up to Danvers, you know. My wife wanted to get out of the city and whatever, and let's move to a quiet place. Well, it was so quiet I couldn't sleep, you know. It was too quiet, you know. So, and that's been that way for like 32 years. So quiet. I mean, it was rare that you see a plane come over. In fact, one time I remember going down to the airport just to see the plane, just to see it fly. Now I see way too many of them. I see them in my dreams. See them in nightmares. I mean, they're everywhere. And I'm not making this stuff up. My good friend Bob and my good friend John Costanza, they have counted the number of takeoffs. I mean, the touch and goes. 30-second intervals, minute intervals, maybe they might fly some 200 missions or more. Am I correct, guys? Over 200 missions at a low area, at a low flight, coming over us, and just, you know, having no regard. You would think even the pilots, you know, that come over the same area would say, geez, you know, I probably am disturbing some people, you know, down below. Maybe I should, you know, go a different way, or, you know, do something different, you know? So I won't be so bothersome, because I had to have gotten word that we've been bothered. And there hasn't been all that much concern about what we're talking about now until recent. 2 years ago, we brought this up, you know, I think, and we didn't get a lot of support. And hopefully now we're getting the support that we should have gotten a long time ago. But, you know, that it is what it is. And I don't think the former director of the airport was of any help. If anything, she was just, you know, making sure the airport did very well and on our backs. And if we complained, and she would say, oh, well, if you ever complain, call us. So you call her. Once in a while, she'd return a call. And I remember she told one of my good friend over here, when he was complaining about the noise, she said, well, you should have talked to your realtor. He should have told you moved next to an airport. Correction, we didn't move next to an airport. We're miles away from the airport. You know, so this baloney about, you know, being next to an airport. I dare say that when the airport came on board in 1928, there were some homes around too. So you're going to say the same argument to the people who are already living there? So there's been, you know, an awful lot of untrue statements. We've heard that, oh, the airport, it brings $34 million to, you know, the region. Where? Where does it go? I don't know. I haven't seen my taxes go down. Have you? No. $34 million. Where is it? And it was an estimate. So I can throw figures around too, but I can tell you what's not an estimate is my tax rate, is my real estate taxes. I know that goes to public schools and the fire department and the police department, but don't go telling me that this airport that's gotten out of control is giving us some $34 million. And as my friend Bob said earlier, and I just wanted to re-emphasize, and I want to also make mention of the fact of how this came about. My good friend John Costanza and I, we were talking about it one day, about the noise and everything else, and we got to talking, and I said, so John, what do they use for gas anyways? You know, he goes, because he's in aviation. He says, oh, they use leaded gas. I said, what? Leaded gas? That was banned in cars 25 years ago. Try to buy paint with lead in it. I don't think so. And yet we're still allowing these propeller, piston-driven planes drop that kind of poisonous, leaded fuel on us, and more importantly, on our children. Bob, I think, mentioned a few of the things that lead poisoning can do. And as he said, there is no safe level of lead usage. Listen to this. It can cause brain damage, learning disabilities, reduce fertility. Jeez, that's really scary. Nerve damage and death. Despite the dangers associated with it, many airplanes continue to utilize leaded fuel, putting the health and safety of Americans, especially children, at risk. That's pretty scary to me. That makes me think if I can't put leaded gas in my car and I can't have lead in my paint, and that was done 25 years ago, this should have been a no-brainer. We shouldn't be allowing planes flying over us over 200 times a day, dropping all of that. It must be gallons of leaded poisonous gas. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. You're breathing it. I'm breathing it. More importantly, our children are breathing it. So you think about that and tell me about, oh, let's, you know, we'll get there in time. We'll, you know, come on, nothing happens overnight. Hey, the fact that it's even happening now is too long. You think about that when you go to sleep tonight, or when you wake up and you're taking a walk downtown and the planes are flying overhead. Oh, yeah, they're flying way over your head. Yeah, it's no big deal. That stuff is falling on you, pals. They're falling on you. No safe level of lead. I will conclude by saying, oh, I just want to say one other thing. There's one more point that I have to make, that they tell us, oh, gee, but there's only 2 flight schools, you know, up in Beverly Airport. I mean, how many planes can there be? You kidding me? Let me list to you the flight schools. There's Beverly Flight Training, Aviair, North Shore Aero Club, Boston Breeze Aviation, Perception Prime, Minnow Pond, Northeast Aero Sources, and then, of course, the helicopter training. Okay? Yeah, and I'm going to tell you something else. That a lot of these pilots that are flying around with these trainings and all that stuff, when they're done for the day, I doubt very few of them go home to Danvers. They go home to their nice little suburban communities where there is no leaded poisoning falling on them. Although I will say that just like the fires from California and the smoke got blown over to us, obviously some of that's going to go over, you know, to other communities. But we are suffering the concentration of this lead that's dropping out of these planes, lickety-split. Just ridiculous. As I said, I want to close now and say that the only good thing is my grandchildren live in Beverly, even though they're going to probably start breathing it if they haven't already. You know, maybe Mayor Cahill will wake up and think that this is not just a Danvers problem, it's a problem for all of us. And the sooner we get rid of the leaded gas, the better will all be for it. There's alternatives. They can do it even now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Tim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim Donahue, Precinct 4 meeting member. I live on the corner of Anthony Lane and Locust Street. When I started dating my wife 20 years ago, I was very familiar with the property as we bought it off our in-laws about 12, 15 years ago, give or take. So when our neighborhood says there's been changes, there really have been changes over the past 3 or so years. You've heard from a lot of the people in the area saying the same things over and over again, so I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to try to keep emotion out of this and just give a few bullet points of things. So runway 27 is the runway that takes over our neighborhood. I am one of the closest ones of the people that I represent to that airport. I'm 1.6 miles away from the beginning of that airport, that runway, excuse me. So just to give you an idea of just some things that I've picked up on just this past Sunday alone, and this was not the worst that we've had. Around 3:45, I recorded 4 planes doing touch and goes, and I sat there with my phone with the stopwatch going, doing the lap timer, and it was every minute and a half was when a new plane came. Now that plane is then 40, 45 seconds to a minute that's making noise over our house. You know, at 11:50 in the morning, there were 5 planes doing that same pattern, and it's just a consistent loop. Now, we've heard a lot about noise. Now, I don't think it's right for citizens to have to go out and spend money in order to basically disprove what the airport is telling us. But still, I've paid money for FlightAware. I've paid money for a decibel app on my phone, and I've recorded some data. Now, we're told that an acceptable level for sound is 85 decibels. Now, I don't know how accurate the app is on my phone, but I've recorded levels as high as 92 decibels. That's loud, and I really want to give you an idea of how loud that is. I'm a commercial landscaper. Backpack blowers is something that's a big deal in some of the communities around us, and the Steel BR800 backpack blower, which is the biggest commercial blower that one of the biggest manufacturers of the products makes, has a decibel rating of 77 decibels at 50 feet. So to give you an idea, you know, Newton, Arlington, Brookline, Lexington, Cambridge, Longport all have leaf blower bans. Now, Newton and Longport, the leaf blower ban decibel limit is 65. Cambridge, it's 70. How is 92 decibels acceptable? How is 85 decibels acceptable? I really think that what is on the airport's website for their noise report should just be thrown out. It's a computer-generated image of how the sound theoretically is generated from the airport. There's no statistical data on it. There's no facts of what the sound is in our neighborhoods. On top of this, I have been arguing for over 2 years now that runway 27 has been used in excess, and runway 27 is not the preferred runway at this airport. January 26, 2001, it was confirmed that data has just not been recorded on which runways are used. There's recorded total for the airport usage, but not which runways were used. I requested at that time that it be addressed, that would be recorded. September 12th, 2022, I re-brought up this issue. At that time, the acting manager, Gloria had been out at that point, the acting manager said it shouldn't be too difficult to record that data, and there's a strong possibility that they could do it. I'm assuming that you guys have not been given any data. And unfortunately, can you confirm that, Mr. Chair?
I have no data.
And I'm actually, due to that, I'm assuming that that data has not been recorded. I don't know if anybody can speak on the matter, if anybody
Well, that would be Aaron's knowledge, being
Yeah.
on the commission.
All right, well, I guess it was thrown out. So it's easy to say what you want to say. It's easy for the airport to say what they want to say when they refuse to record data. I do appreciate, Dan, I very much so appreciate the personal invitation you sent to a lot of the people that were addressing these things to come to this meeting. I really appreciate Sally Kearns and Joan Lovely for their efforts they've put forward, and I appreciate Seth Moulton sending somebody from his office. It's nice that we're being heard, but this is not a new issue when it comes to the lead that everybody's been talking about. The House Subcommittee on the Environment, which Mr. Barrows had spoken about, held a hearing on July 28th, 2022. The hearing was titled Toxic Air, How Lead Aviation Fuel is Poisoning America's Children. It's a lot, right on the subcommittee's website is a link to a video that has significant things that were said in that hearing. I encourage people to watch it, but I encourage most to go to about the 56-minute mark and listen to this testimony of Dr. Bruce Lanphier. In his testimony, he says, there's no safe amount of lead in our children's bodies. Airborne lead at the lowest measurable levels, which I believe is 1 part per billion, is absorbed into children's bodies, into children's blood, and does not go away. It just accumulates. Lead aviation fuel falling from the sky in neighborhoods within flight paths of piston planes creates a 57% increase in the number of children whose IQ is considered challenged. I want to say that again. Lead falling from these planes has created a 57% increase in the number of children whose IQs are considered challenged in the neighborhoods where they fall. Likewise, it has decreased by 57% the number of children who are gifted in those neighborhoods. Piston planes create 70% of all leaded emissions in the United States. 70% of all leaded emissions. And even the smallest amount of lead matters, especially when it's in the air and most easily absorbed into the body. On top of this, 1 in 5 cases of ADHD in America can be linked to lead. There's also other challenges, such as heart disease, with a high mortality rate that lead then creates and complicates. So you'll hear a lot of, we've heard a lot of pilots explaining the importance of training. I don't think you've heard anybody arguing this. You've heard a lot of pilots over the past, mostly at the airport meetings, explaining the importance of the airport. I haven't heard anybody say that they want to shut down the airport. We just want our neighborhood back the way it was. Now, I don't think this is NASCAR. I believe planes can turn left and right. Why is it so consistent that planes are always following the same route over the most dense populated areas of Danvers? There's turn the other way, you can go over Wenham Lake, you can go over farms that aren't populated, a lot of areas that don't have the concentrations of population that we are dealing with. I could probably go on for a while, but I think that's about all I need to say. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tim.
I appreciate it.
Mark? You here?
Like you forgot about me.
I would forget you. Save the best for last.
Oh. Before I forget, I have a copy of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've,
I can look at Steve's.
do you have enough? Okay.
I'll give mine to the clerk afterwards.
Sorry?
I'll give mine to the clerk afterwards.
Oh, I thought you were, okay. I will give her mine if she wants. I'm very generous today. So thank you very much for this opportunity to address the continued issues with the airport within our community. The one person that you have identified as not being here, the main responsible individuals who have authority to resolve these issues, are not present at this hearing. The Beverly mayor has been absent from meetings held by the Beverly Airport Commission regarding these issues. We've asked them personally to come to the meeting. The airport manager resigned. Several Beverly Airport commissioners also resigned or want out, both Danvers and Beverly. The issues began many years ago, as we heard from our residents, as we remember the history of our neighbor, the Beverly Airport. The current primary issues can be summed up and identified as problems after appointment of the airport manager in July of 2018. That's when a lot of these things have started to materialize. The noise, and I'm not going to go into detail because I think you've heard a lot of things about the noise and the effects it has on the quality of life. But the noise and the safety concerns created by the overflights of these planes, now we have large jets flying in and out, larger jets, which are the business jets. And I get them at my location, and I'm almost in Middleton. Danger to our schools and residential occupants in our community. The flights come off the runway right over the high school. Good neighbor policy has been scrapped, and the issue remains outstanding. The noise abatement policy has finally been revealed to the airport commissioners, and they've taken some steps in addressing that, so I thank you very much. Environmental concerns regarding the leaded fuel are still outstanding, and you've heard that this evening. Water quality contaminants regarding the PFAS contamination, which may be affecting our water supply. No resolution presented regarding this issue, and this is a result of some foam that was used at the airport by the regional fire department in practice. That issue has been identified and wells have been installed, but we have no results from that. We already have issues with the PFAS contaminants in our own wells. How did this happen? We don't know. The master plan presented in 2020 has expansion plans to the length of the runways over 300 feet into Danvers. Master plan indicates an increase in larger and heavier jets coming to town. The business jets are already flying over our neighborhoods. We are inundated with the Beverly Airport traffic and also the Logan Airport activities every evening. You have the international flights coming across from the northeast, and they're coming into Logan. Beverly Airport has already been designated as an overflow airport for relief to Logan. That has been expressed to us many times. It is also looking at customs for international flights. Environmental impact study has been identified and requested, but without even an acknowledgement by the Beverly Airport Commission or the state legislature. And the legislators have tried very hard to assist us in identifying this. The legislature needs to hold hearings with support of the FAA to address this situation. The environmental impact statement would identify noise, fumes, air quality, water quality, and all of the effects that are being felt by our residents. The current master plan, which was unveiled in 2020, is at the FAA for review without response to the neighbors. The neighbors have submitted many comments to that master plan. The residents don't even know if their comments have been heard, and that has been identified at the last commissioners' meeting. They didn't even know that that was happening. These issues are only the surface of the problems coming from our neighboring establishment. The noise has now become the primary issue, but as you see, there are more imminent solutions required. And they're more related to environment. Noise is one of the environment impacts that we're feeling. The board is limited to what can be done, but you need to take action to preserve our quality of life and save our neighborhoods from destruction, whether it's environmental or noise. I want to thank you, and I think you've heard an awful lot tonight, and these individuals, these residents, have expressed their views, and this is nothing new. I mean, the comment in regard to the tree cutting, that was done in 1997 or 98, and I was involved in that, and nothing has changed since then. The only thing that we have done, and we have basically forgiven the real estate taxes that are due on the 140 acres of land that is being used by the Beverly Airport. And it's worth over $44 million. And we are forgiving every single year $1 million worth of tax revenue. That's all I have. Thank you very much. And I'm glad you didn't forget about me.
Didn't forget about you. So that figure that you gave out, I don't think is quite accurate, Mr. Bartha.
Just as a point of clarification, the assessed value of the 144 acres is probably close to what you described, but the pilot payment, the taxes associated that were set in statute more than 80 years ago.
Yeah.
So per state law, the amount that the town is forgiving is around $6,700.
Well,
so there may be an opportunity. We've started that conversation with our delegation about revisiting that section of law, because the law, that pilot was set before you were born.
Before I was born?
You're a young man.
Well, maybe,
well before
maybe.
you were born.
I may be there. But the problem is that I calculated that based on an industrial rate for that property, because that's how it's zoned. Right. And it's 140 acres, and the valuations are listed in the real estate pages here in Town Hall. I got those copies, and it comes out to over $1 million a year. So that's
correct. If the chief assessor were to apply the current commercial tax rate on that property, absent the stipulation in state law, I think those numbers would be accurate.
Right. Absolutely, it can be changed.
It's certainly applying to us.
Well, it's thank you very much, and I appreciate that. But that's something that has been bothering a lot of the residents, because we are not being considered in the flight schools and the flights that are taking place, and the expansion is going wild. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We have one last speaker, Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stan Sleepoy, 5 Bradford Road. I apologize, I didn't hear the first part of the meeting, but I wanted to add our concerns as well, my wife and I. We are new to Danvers, and in since May, we have experienced the same problems with the touch and go. We had hoped that we could have a nice ranch to be able to have during our quiet years. That's not becoming so quiet. We cannot be in our backyard right now with the touch and goes that happen every minute by minute by minute in the backyard. I've been working from home for the last 3 years. I have to put on the headphones as well. At night, when the larger planes come in at 11 o'clock, they're landing, I have to have the earplugs in. Noise is a major problem, and it is an environmental factor as well. I am surprised to hear some of the testimony here today. The first thing that struck me, and I noticed the town clerks had acknowledged, those are public records that seem to have disappeared. We need to investigate why those public records from the Beverly Airport have disappeared. If you don't have the records, you can't verify that, in fact, many of these things that have been happening are taking place. We need to ask that one question. As to the environmental aspect to our congressman's office, $21 million given towards the expansion. There must have been a MEPA or a NEPA application that had been filed for the expansion of the airport. Where are those records that the public can look at and be able to view what is happening with the expansion and to quantify some of the things that are happening? We need to be able to look at those as well. Those should be on record. That's MEPA, Massachusetts Environmental Protection Agency. NEPA is the National Environmental Protection Agency, of which the FAA is also subject to. We need to gather that information. Certainly, I'm hearing that this has been increased over the last 3 years. Lead paint over our school, over our Danvers High School. This is a health emergency. From what I can understand of some of the Danvers history, there was an explosion here. And one of the results of that explosion is that the filling of propane tanks was eliminated. Don't you think that this is an equal health emergency to that? It needs to be addressed at the Board of Health as well. And I wish there was some sort of coordination that has taken place with the neighbors to be able to funnel in this information about the frequency of flights, the noise problem, to gather information about the lead problem. All of this has to be the coordination, and I think that's the leadership of this Board of Selectmen to be able to help funnel that information. And I'm asking you, Mr. Chairman, to be able to take the initiative to be able to gather this information. If a noise complaint is going into a voicemail someplace, why isn't that information somehow on a daily basis being transmitted to the towns of Danvers and to the towns of Beverly? These records, if they're not preserved, can't quantify the extent of the problem that's happening. Now, why we don't have better representation as a large landowner of the, and part of the town of Danvers, 140 acres, why is it that we don't have an proportionate representation on that Beverly Commission? Just because Beverly receives $34 million a year in revenue, part of that is being taken by the problems that the Danvers residents have to experience on a daily, on an hourly basis. And I'm very surprised that more class action suits haven't been filed to be able to find out these information. And I'm asking you as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, I'm asking you as each of the selectmen, please understand this is a health crisis, and noise is part of a health crisis as well. And they're not being good neighbors, and from what I'm hearing, they increasingly have not been good neighbors. Where will it stop if there's an increase, if there's an expansion of the airport? What will the future look like for the neighbors here? It's not a pretty one from what I can see. And I'm upset about it enough that this is our second meeting and action needs to be taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma, do you want to make any comment or at this time or not? No, thank you. But you listened, you heard, thank you. Sally?
I would add only that the legislation that I filed will, excellent comments, by the way. Stan, welcome to town. I've known Stan for years, but in a different context, so that was very helpful. Great job, everybody. The legislation that I filed and will refile would require the airport to collect data, and it would require Mass Aeronautics Commission to collect data from all the airports and post the data on their website. They will hate this idea, but I think it's worth pursuing, and we're going to file it again, and we'll see. Maybe, you know, if we could depend upon good data, it might make things a lot clearer, and perhaps then, you know, we would have another lever to pull. It's been very hard to find the right levers to pull, but I think the MIPA NEPA suggestions are excellent, Stan, and so I will follow up on that. Yeah, and Norm, I'll touch base with you as well on the MIPA and NEPA and the environmental. I do want to clarify one thing. I think I'm correct. Beverly doesn't get $34 million in revenue from the airport. And Aaron, maybe you could clarify some of these things, because believe me, I don't want to be apologizing for Beverly Airport, but I do believe that that's a misconception. The airport loves to say they generate all of this activity and they attach numbers and it's millions and millions and millions. But the notion that the city of Beverly gets $34 million from the airport is false. That is not the case. So I don't know if, Aaron, if you want to add to that.
No, the manager will answer that.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I don't know I'm not intimately familiar with the financial details of the airport. I know in their airport is set up a little bit like our water and sewer fund. So in their audited financial statements, it's about a $550,000 operating budget with revenue offsetting the. That's separate from any leases that the airport itself may have with operators. But I think the $34 million figure that's been mentioned tonight, people talk about economic impact studies. I don't know how you quantify that, but I think the idea is that the author of the study is trying to make the argument that the secondary and tertiary benefits of having the airport. So again, that's not revenue going to the city or to the town or to the state or anything like that.
Well, they like to brag about how millions have come to the region. I think they mentioned 34 million coming to the region. I don't know. I'd like to know where that goes. Don't just go throwing out that kind of a number and not have some backup.
Joe, please.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I appreciate it. When people start throwing away round numbers, I always scratch my head.
That's what I'm saying. And that's
Where's the proof? So that's what. Right. So tonight's meeting was to hear from everybody, give them equal time. I didn't time you. I didn't shut anybody off. Wanted Norman to hear so he can take it back to Seth Moulton's office. No. Sally is on top of it. She's going to file additional legislation. She has to refile it because it's a new session, so she'll take care of that. Aaron represents Danvers on the commission. We have a spot available for another Danvers resident on that commission, and I'd really put the word out for somebody to volunteer to serve on that commission and represent Danvers. Unfortunately, with the commission and Aaron, I think his hands are tied a little bit, but he brings our concerns to the commission. There are other openings on that commission. Hopefully that Mayor Cahill puts people that are consumer and resident friendly on that commission. Hopefully he hires a manager and gives them direction to be a good neighbor and not be building their resume. I think they've raised the stipend, if you'll call it a stipend, the pay raise to recruit a qualified individual. So those are the things that are going to look forward to. What this board can do, tonight is not a night for us to take action. Aaron, myself, the manager, will sit down with the representative Kerens. Hopefully Norman and his people will be involved, and we can work through these issues and hopefully in a short time start to resolve these environmental issues, if we call them that. We've heard you tonight. We're not taking action tonight. I wanted to hear it from everybody. I'm sure some of my fellow board members may want to make comments. I have no comments other than we need somebody else to represent Danvers on the commission. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of thoughts. I've been 80 years here, and I remember Earl Robbins' airport, and I have watched the growth of Beverly Airport. I took lessons there once. I took 3 lessons, and on the 4th morning, I threw up and called up the instructor and said, no, I can't continue. Just send me a bill for the 4th lesson. These things come to my mind as I'm listening to these brilliant, helpful, thoughtful presentations tonight. Number one, I feel terribly sorry for Joan Lovely and Sally Kearns, who are 2 of my favorite legislators, who are totally at the mercy of the United States government. Absolutely at the mercy. And I'm so glad that there is a representative from Congressman Moulton's office who, when it comes to this, is at the mercy of the United States government. The airplane lobby and power in this country is absolutely astounding, involving billions and billions and billions of dollars every year. So any little thing that we want to try to do or get their attention for is clouded over by billions of dollars. So what can Seth Moulton's office do? Probably nothing. What can Sally and Joan do? I don't know. Probably nothing. I have listened to complaints here from neighbors for a couple of years now, several years. This is my 10th year here, and we have periodic comments, and I have felt helpless and alone. It's like, what in God's name can I do? And frankly, I'm sick and tired of feeling helpless. So I have a couple of other thoughts. Number one, I think there should be a formal and forceful opposition to any expansion of the Beverly Airport. None. Not another brick, not another fuse, not another plane, nothing, nothing, nothing. Nothing further to exacerbate what's going on. It's not going to cure it. Stop them. That's an idea. I do thank you, Norm, for being here tonight, and don't envy your job of listening to us, trying, as I'm sure you want to be helpful. I'm sure Congressman Moulton wants to be helpful, and I think he probably feels as helpless as we do. I don't want to speak for the congressman. Aaron, I don't know why you took the, I guess you didn't have any chance to take, you didn't have an I guess you were appointed. Thank you for trying, because I know you, and I see you working, and I know that this rips at you, your probable sense of inability to do effective things to solve the problems that are driving my people nuts, and your people. The third thing, I'm up to Gloucester 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm going into that cruise port restaurant, which I really like. And I can't walk very well, so I have a handicap thing, and I use it. And I park near the door. And there are three men and their female companions, all probably 50 years old, working on their unfinished toilet training issues with motorcycles. And when they started them up, the broom, broom, broom was the most disgusting, rude thing. It is like farting in somebody's face. My friend Eddie has a motorcycle. You can't hear it. My former colleague Rosemary from where I worked in the courthouse, she and her husband go riding on a motorcycle. You can't hear it. There has to be a way where those absolutely rude human beings who haven't finished their toilet training, who are upping and downing and upping and downing, why does it have to be like the motorcycle in front of the cruise port? I will never understand that.
That's what the pilots do.
Where are we? My next thought is, I've been a lawyer for 54 years. Courts can do wonderful things. Seems to me there have to be some court actions against nuisance. Now, for example, supposing my neighbor had a license from the Board of Health to raise chickens or goats,
And supposing the manure piled up for 3 years and the stench was so bad it would come into my house and make me and all of my guests throw up. You can't do that. And you can't do it with noise, and you can't do it with other forms of poison, and there is a legal remedy. Unfortunately, I'm retired. I'm not taking any more cases. And the thought of suing the Beverly Airport on a nuisance theory would be very expensive, but it could be a class action, and maybe there is some, in NECN in the morning, the Morgan law, there's some law firm, they're the biggest. Morgan & Morgan, the biggest, somebody should call Morgan & Morgan, they're the biggest in the world. And then just finally, I want to say something about comments about taxes and the mystery about why Danvers gets an absolute pittance from the Beverly Airport. By the way, I have the same agony with Essex Aggie, St. John's Prep, Mass General Hospital, and all of the other. We are protecting and providing police and fire service and roads and infrastructure for some $6 billion worth, I think it's $6 billion worth of property in Danvers. $5 billion of that is us, ordinary taxpayers who are paying the tab for the other billion that are untaxed and not. It is wrong. And people say, well, there's an educational exemption for. There shouldn't be anymore. It's over. It's over. There is no more need. There is a medical exemption for hospitals and schools. The building down on Endicott Street, that isn't a medical building. It's a real estate holding company which is leasing offices to doctors who charge a fortune that Medicaid pays with our money, and it is a scam. And to think that that is a hospital and should have the benefit of tax exemption is wrong. And I love Essex Aggie. I was the chairman of the board there 30 years ago. Why am I paying all of that money to Essex Aggie? And I went to St. John's Prep. That property, I don't know if we even bother assessing it. It's one of the most exquisite signature places in the town of Danvers. And taxes, zero. So it's not just the Beverly tax thing that troubles me. It's mentioned tonight. It's the whole thing about the freeloaders of exemptions under state law that are making the rest of us pay for it. And I don't mean to put it on Sally and Joan because they got a lot to do, and God knows if they ever tried to tackle the educational exemption, they'd be up against a Harvard endowment and a BU endowment of billions of dollars. So everybody else knows, you're watching it on television. I don't watch the news anymore, but many of you probably still do. Billions and billions and billions of dollars control our lives. And how are we going to, I suppose one of the ways that we deal with it is we begin talking about it. So those were my thoughts tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Matt?
Thank you. So I've, for many years, just felt Danvers has been sort of the poor stepchild when it comes to the airport. Dismissive by the management of the airport, and that's been exuberated from this past manager that we had. So hopefully we can convince the Beverly mayor to hire someone that kind of sees the airport being in one large community, not differentiate between Beverly, Wenham, Danvers, and kind of ensure that we all receive equal treatment. Many of the comments that I've heard tonight, specifically about the noise and the frequency of the touch and goes, is something that I experience. I live by Plains Park, and that's sort of the southern apex of the touch and goes. And to the gentleman from Juniper Ridge, his point about not all planes sound the same, that's definitely true. And others have mentioned that as well. Some planes sound as if they have open headers where, you hear them as early as 6 a.m. And in the summertime when you have your windows open, That seems to be something that the airport can control, right? They can control what occurs on the ground. They need to be some type of, Mr. Donahue mentioned the decibel readings. Those need to be enforced, right? Especially when they're in the air.
You should do some lead readings, too.
Yeah, there needs to be more testing, more more understanding about what the impact actually is to the residents. I mean, we know what we see and what we hear, but there's probably other things going on in the background that we're missing. Also, with the frequency, I heard people say once every minute. There needs to be some type of throttling down on the number of takeoffs. Maybe one every 5 minutes, one every 10 minutes. There needs to be some kind of control over that. I heard recently that the Lawrence Airport restricted the number of touch and goes, and then that activity has come to Danvers, and maybe that's what we're seeing, right? That there's a significant increase over the past few years because other airports have kind of taken control and said, we don't want this in our community. Maybe North Andover or Lawrence, or, those communities have kind of pushed back, and they've actually gotten some resolution, right? But at our expense, right? So I think having the federal representation here, and as well as the state tonight, that's a good sign that shows that you know, that possibly that we can come to some type of resolution, especially with a new manager that kind of takes Danvers' concerns seriously, and we just don't have a token representation on the commission that really has no power and really is their input isn't really valued. So I hope that this type of these types of meetings where we can kind of come together and share what we're experiencing has a lot of value for the state. And to Sally's initiative for new legislation, maybe there are other airports in the area like Norwood or you know, up in Newburyport, I think, and have get some of the legislators from those communities involved as well, and kind of get a groundswell of kind of a effort from the legislation or from the legislators to kind of work together from a kind of a regional or a statewide level. I think that would go a long ways, rather than just being Danvers against, you know, the airport. It's kind of strength in numbers, I think. So that's something that is probably would add value. So that's all I have. Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Some of us have been at this for decades. Some of us are new to town, and so often is the case that we, the ones who have been at this for a long time, think that, you know, what we know, everybody knows, and that's not factual. And Mr. Zubrick used a phrase that I want to use tonight too, is responsible for resolution. We've had a lot of issues here tonight, and I kept track of categories. And some people spoke to 3 or 4 categories, some people spoke to 1. And the heavy ones were touch and goes, noise, the lead gas. Other people, you know, had concerns about safety, danger, helicopter flight schools, so on and so forth. And I want to talk about responsible for resolution, because there's actually 4 parties who have some responsibility for resolutions in this scenario. You've got the federal government, you've got the state legislature, you've got Beverly, and Beverly Airport is an extension of that, and you've got Danvers. And there are things that each of them can do and things that some of them can't do. For example, the issue about lead gas. I'm as appalled by it as you are. I'm concerned about it as well. But Danvers doesn't control the airspace. And the state doesn't control the airspace. That's the FAA and the federal government. And so we rely on our federal representation to work on those items. Danvers can't wave a wand and say no more lead gas flight over Danvers. We just don't have that opportunity or ability. I'd love to have that opportunity or ability, but we don't. So we have to say, if we're going to focus on lead gas, the people who are concerned about that, we should be working with Mr. Moulton's office and this federal legislation. Focus there. When you want resolution on the lead gas issue, focus there, because Danvers has done what it can. We've sent letters to our legislator saying this is important to our town. We want you to work hard on this.
But they could cut back on the flights, though.
No, Danvers cannot cut back on flights.
Well, they could.
No, let me, I'm speaking.
We listen to everybody out there. Please listen to us.
And to that point, I'll address that point. What happens off the ground is not state, is not Danvers, is not Beverly. What happens when that plane leaves the ground is the FAA and the FAA entirely. The town of Danvers cannot limit flights. The town of Beverly cannot limit flights. The Beverly Airport cannot limit flights. The state legislature couldn't limit flights.
And how come we didn't hear them for so many years? I'm sorry, just.
I'm offering what I've understood from my time on the airport commission before I became a selectman and the knowledge since. But the reality is, and I think you have important points, and I'm saying you have to go to the right people to solve it.
Well, they did in the past.
Please stop.
I'm sorry.
The federal government is responsible for your gas issue, for the lead gas issue. That's not something Danvers or the state can address. The federal government is responsible for the FAA, the flights, the tower that decides what runway is used and directs what runway is used, the number of flights, the allowable times of flights, all that is the federal government, the FAA. And if we're going to direct our efforts to that, let's direct our efforts to the FAA. Then you work with the state legislature. The state legislature is working on data collection, which is an important part of this whole discussion, which is to say we need data collection to validate, to prove, to demonstrate our points. We need data collection. Our state legislators are working on that. We talked about the taxability and the representation on this board. That was set by the state legislature 80 years ago. Danvers cannot itself change that. Beverly can't change that. That was set. We have legislation that limits how much the water resource for Salem is charged in taxes, how much the jail is charged in taxes, how much the Aggie is charged in taxes. That's all state legislation. So if we want to address that issue, that's where we go for that resolution. We go to them, and we also work with the Mass Aeronautics Commission on the things that they can do. But again, there's silos of who can do what. Beverly is the mayor and the councilors are going to hire a new airport manager. I was there 3 managers ago. Bob Mazzetti was a longtime manager, friendly to both communities. He retired. He was there when some unfortunate situations went on, like when the tree cutting, the clear cutting. But again, that was a Mass Aeronautics and FAA decision, not Beverly Airports. They are the facilitators of those things. Nonetheless, what can Danvers do? Danvers does have things it can do. We can have input into the hiring of this manager. We can get back strong representation, a new representative who will hold, as well as work with our current representative to forward our concerns and our issues that Danvers has to Beverly Airport. And we can do what we are doing, which is to encourage the federal side of things to solve the federal issues that they're responsible for, and the state, for the things the state can do to support that, we can do that. What I'm going to suggest that as an action item we take away is the board decide on those things we want the new manager to do at Beverly Airport. We should insist on equitable distribution by the tower. We should have a manager who works with the FAA. And again, that manager will be limited by what the FAA does, but has a strong voice in making sure we have equitable distribution by the tower. I agree. I have never said anything other than I agree that the increases have happened over Danvers in the past 3 years. That's because the longtime FAA tower person retired. What the new person does, what the guidelines they get, anecdotally, we can't say, why is this helicopter over this space and not that space, when we don't know every other air traffic pattern in the area. We are in a Class A airspace. It's not just what happens around Beverly, it happens in what's happening in Logan as well. So there may be a reason not to put a helicopter over here because international flights are coming in. We don't know because we're lay people. The FAA knows, and they are responsible for tracking that data as well. So we need to encourage, I would suggest the board needs to encourage our representation and the town manager working with the mayor, insist on a manager who will be strong and insistent on equitable distribution by the tower. Insist on the data collection that can be had by the tower. And not only just the data collection, but the publication and communication of that information. Insist on public participation in good neighbor policies and others. This meeting's great. This meeting should happen with not only Danvers, but Danvers and the leaders of Danvers, and Beverly and the leaders of Beverly, and the Airport Commission, and the public of Beverly. We should have a big public meeting. Because I am certain that Beverly has issues that they want to bring to the table as well. I have no doubt. And to the point that people are making, complaints to the Beverly Airport should be cataloged, tracked, and publicized. That is something that the new manager should be insistent upon.
No, ma'am.
No. So what we can do is to encourage that hiring of a person who will be strong on those points. What we can't do is stop lead gas. What we can't do is stop flights over our town. That's something we just don't have that opportunity, the legal opportunity to do. So we can encourage that. We can ask for limits. We can look at Lawrence, and if what they've proposed and done is legal and allowable, and I can't say that it is or isn't, pursue that as well. But that is going to be Danvers to Beverly, Beverly to the state or to the FAA. Understand that like you said, who's responsible for resolution, and let's focus on what Danvers can do. Let's help the state do what they can do. Let's encourage the federal government to do what they can do, and Beverly to do what they can do. But I can't solve the lead gas issue. I wish I could. I wish I could wave that wand and do that. I can't solve the issue of why is the FAA tower person.
Again, you're starting to repeat yourself a
doing
little bit.
things.
So
All right,
let-
let me finish. I'll
Yep.
wrap up. So I understand everybody's frustration. I've heard it for years. I understand it. But let's focus on the things that Danvers can do, Beverly can do, the state can do, and the federal government can do, and focus on the people who can make those changes.
So, if I may, I already stated that from this meeting, Aaron, myself, the manager, and whoever else would sit down and put together an action plan to move forwards. For us to do it tonight is not going to work. Gardner has a lot of good points, and not that certainly those points will
Me
will
let
be-
you or participate as you wish.
Either way.
Can I comment,
Yes,
Dan?
it's your turn.
All right, thank you very much for everybody coming. Bob, Joe, Ed, we've read everybody's letters. They're very important to us. I, too, live behind Bob's neighborhood, too, and I've seen a lot of the planes, too. So what these neighbors are saying are absolutely true. David, I like when you get mad. I agree with everything you say. I mean, go, David, go. Everybody has some good points. I mean, we have to request they change the routes, you know, the flight patterns. Something's changed. You're absolutely right, because they do go over and over and over, the touch and goes. Start looking at the tower records, where they're going. Let's get those flight training schools to give certain operational hours, you know, times, days. I mean, restrict them. We've got to do something. I mean, we've got the power right here, right? Everybody. I like the impact study, Tony. I think definitely. And then I have a question. Why can't we as the select board with our town manager meet personally with Mayor Cahill and sit down, us all as a board, and, you know. let's start with the mayor. It sounds like the mayor, I think positive energy, let's put positive energy out there and vibes. I think that airport manager getting out is good for us. So let's get a new appointment on the board. Tony, you'd be a great voice, to be something, with that. But I think we have to support Sally Kearns, let her continue, those filings continue over and over. Thank you for Seth Moulton's office coming too, with everybody between Joan, you, and Sally, and all of us. And I just think, Steve, you have a good rapport. We've seen Mayor Cahill at chamber events. Let's go as a board and show him, let's sit down. If we're saying good neighbor policy, well, they're our neighbors. So from town manager to mayor to select boards, let's tackle this all together for everybody. And, I apologize, I feel bad for Miss Osgood. Hearing that story, that was the first, I've heard it, I've read it before, but I forgot, it's terrible. And the fuel is definitely a problem, but I think us as a board, I'd like to have a meeting with the mayor, all of us, and see where we can go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We have our homework. We will work on it in the near future. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
You did good.
Let's do it, Steve.
Hi, Julie.
I met with him last week. He's very receptive.
I think he's receptive now, isn't he? Yeah. That's good.
Coming from another meeting.
Hoping to clear the room because we go out there and start asking, answering questions.
Mayor
If you
Cahill,
don't-
Maureen, I just want to give you.
That's what I'm doing now.
We should have this
Go
meeting
ahead.
with Cahill.
Yeah,
First-
go.
First of all, I think it's great that you said we should all go. Yeah, but I'm thinking all the elected representatives.
works well during normal times. We are certainly not out of, I would say we're still in abnormal times. And if the costs continue to increase year over year, the funding framework falls apart. So the MMA is aware of that. The Mass superintendents are aware of that. Sally, the rep in the center, are aware of that. But this is going to be something that we have to deal with in the spring and moving forward. And then the third broad goal, we're seeing this across all of our department budgets. Inflation is wreaking havoc on all the business owners in the room can attest to. We had our water budget review last week. Some of the parts and pieces that our water techs use in repairing the system are up 250% year over year. These are everyday fixtures and pieces that we use to maintain the system. So we'll have a lot of discussion in the budget process about where inflation has impacted the budget. It does look like it's starting to level off. The Townsend financial advisors are not predicting that the rate of inflation will continue, but in the meantime, as we're putting this budget together, it certainly is taking a toll. So happy to take any questions, but if the board sees fit to approve this, the finance director will incorporate it into the budget process moving forward.
Questions, comment, Maureen?
No, I definitely think the trash is really big for us, for the taxpayers. So, no, I'm happy with these budget goals.
Thank you, David.
Well, thank you, Dan. The whole thing just terrifies me, 1, 2, and 3, because I don't know where we're going to get any more money, and I know it's everything that we're doing is going to cost, and the trash and recycling thing has been kind of, I've been waking up at 4 in the morning for the last 6 months worrying about that. So, yeah, I think that this is very competently, excellently presented. That doesn't mean that it's comfortable. It's very unsettling. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Thank you. So we did discuss this at length at the last few meetings. I think that these 3 bullet items for the budget goals, I think that that's going to impact us from a levy limit perspective, that something else has to be cut. So these goals, these 3 goals, accepting these means cuts will need to occur elsewhere to kind of have a balanced budget. So maybe you can kind of delve into that a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to mention under the manager update, we wrapped up today our departmental budget meetings. So we've been through the proposed budgets with all of the departments. By elevating these goals, that doesn't mean that we won't be working on all of the other items. Healthcare costs will be up this year. Pension costs are up every single year. We're anticipating an increase in our Essex Tech assessment this year. We haven't gone through revenue yet. You know, we do have some tools at our disposal. So one thing that will happen is that a balanced budget will be presented to this board on March 1st. And in terms of, as we look at the special ed costs as an example, we do have some circuit breaker reserves, which is the funding mechanism I was describing. We'll look to chip away at the problem through free cash, depending on that certification, use of some of the one-time revenues that the federal government gave to the schools, the ESSER grant. So we'll be able to attack it from a couple of different angles. Trash, maybe a combination of absorbing cost increases, but also looking at the level of service. So we don't currently have, we have very loose limits, and David Lane presented this a couple of months ago, but we may have to ratchet back the amount of trash that can be put out each week as a way to start to get our arms around the cost. So, you know, at this point, having been through all the budgets, we're not anticipating service reduction to get to that balanced budget, but we may have to change some of the ways that we approach these things.
So it's important that there's some flexibility, right? That if we do need to curtail services that we provide today, we do it kind of in a thoughtful way.
Absolutely.
Try to you know, enact the cuts so that so taxpayers can kind of understand the bind that we might be in.
And on the back page of this document too, and it's really true, we talk about increases and increases being done equitably, so that no one area of the budget dominates in terms of services, and the same would apply for reductions. You know, we have we're very fortunate that the water, sewer, and electric are really part of the town, so we can collaborate there, and we do. I say this every year, but we have a good working relationship with the schools, with their finance team, with their leadership team, so we collaborate on problem solving. We've been involved trying to think through the special ed spike with them from the very beginning. A lot of districts don't reveal that information until the 11th hour, and we've been talking to them since they identified it as a need.
Perhaps the state has opportunities that we might be able to kind of leverage for the special ed component. From the trash perspective, I think it's kind of I think it's time to kind of rein in the just, you know, bags and bags of trash that some households generate, kind of force them into a kind of a more of a sustainable goal of, you know, one large container for each household, as many other communities such as Salem and Peabody have implemented. They've gone to the sort of, you know, the automated bin pickup. So perhaps at the moment it looks like it could be a substantial cost increase, but if it's enacted, this new trash pickup process, perhaps that it will kind of be a wash where there won't be a significant increase.
I don't think we see a scenario where it's a wash, but certainly we can shave the peak with some tweaks on the back end.
Right. Okay, so overall, I think the goals are kind of clear and easy to understand. So I think that you've done a good job of kind of categorizing each of them. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Gardner?
I'm in support of what's here. I had mentioned, and I think the biggest unknowns that will bite us is the transfer station, special education, and inflation. A lot of unknowns there, but I also think one of the biggest threats that to our balanced budget is the unregulated, unbalanced, unfair Essex Tech assessment. The ability for them to layer on as many students as they want and charge us the bill without any input from the town, without any recourse from the town, that puts us in a position where we're supporting more students than any other community per capita, which we're doing now, but they're looking to expand, and that will only exacerbate the situation. I think there should be something in here that addresses that it's a town priority to try to get a reasonable and predictable Essex Tech assessment. I would ask to add that.
If I may, through the efforts of the Education Department and the state, vocational schools are being urged to change their admission policy, and a lottery is one of those changes. If Essex Tech were to adopt a lottery system, accepting X amount of students commensurate with the population of the community initially, and then if there's empty seats, they can go to their waiting list. We need to urge the vocational schools, all of them, to adopt that lottery system on an equitable basis. That's really the only way we're going to be able to control the cost, in my opinion. I really don't see another way to control it other than not paying it.
And I think we should be encouraging that is a priority to whether we participate, however we participate as a board, or direct the town manager participate, work with our legislatures, however it is. I think it should be a noted directive or goal of ours to get this to be predictable and equitable.
On my original draft, I had written Essex Tech is one of the items to consider. But I didn't see that this year, not that it's not important that but I don't see this year that overshadowing any one of these three. I think this goal, anticipating the problems, developing plans early on, will help contain these costs and have a balanced budget. I don't see how we can do anything with the Essex Tech enrollment at this point, short of the high school itself and the junior high.
Right, the history is history.
Right, exactly. But that's
And
what
I'm
we
not
need.
suggesting, A, I don't know if we're bound to 3, but B, I'm not suggesting that's any more important than any of the 3. It could be put in other long-term goals.
Steve, you have something to say?
I would note, I think if the board wanted to make that a priority, I would suggest it be done outside of the budget policy, because it's not an expense that these are items that we can manage these through service level decisions. We can't do that with the tech. That's more of that, that's outside of our control. But I guess my recommendation to the board would be that if that's to be adopted as a priority, we do that separate and distinct from the budget policy itself.
But I guess my thought is that an uncontrolled assessment will lead to other budget impacts. If the number doubles because they get granted the expansion they want, and I realize that she is down the road, but eventually, we should be taking steps now that say, if you're going to expand, we want to work on making sure we serve you equitably. We want the students at Danvers to go to the tech, no doubt about it. I want even a little bit more than our fair share, but I don't want 2 or 3 or 4 times our fair share.
I think my point, though, is we can work on inflation by looking for other vendors. We can attack special ed costs by looking at circuit breaker reserve versus free cash versus encouraging the schools to develop programming to bring kids back in district. We can control the cost of trash to a certain extent through RFP decisions that we make, but we don't have control over budgetarily over the Essex Tech assessment. That's done through a political process rather than a budget process. I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be a priority of the board. I'm saying that through the budget process that starts now through March, there's nothing budgetarily that can be done as part of this policy to address that.
It's a budget buster, and I think it should
Absolutely
be one
is.
of our ongoing strategic objectives. But if it's not going to be supported by the rest of the board, that's fine.
Can we have a motion to accept the budget policy as presented?
Well, just for fairness,
Yes.
just to get it out there, I move we accept the budget policy, but add an ongoing strategic objective to work on controlling the Essex Tech assessment to have a balanced and fair.
So on the backside, we'll add at the bottom, Essex Tech
Assessment management
assessment.
or resolution, however you want to phrase
I
it.
don't think management is appropriate. Steve, what do you recommend?
I think it makes more sense on the back as an ongoing
That's what
objective.
I'm saying.
Like management or resolution?
We don't have to, if you'd like to give it, we can wordsmith something and bring it back
So for
in
tonight, we'll
January.
put Essex Tech assessment.
We could take no action tonight. We could draft,
We take no action?
if the board's interested, we could draft something and bring it back in January.
Okay.
And
Well,
our
would it be
little-
more appropriate for me to make the motion and have it seconded and make sure it's the will of the board? This is my thought.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Make the motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we send this back and ask for an additional ongoing strategic objective for whatever control we can have over the equitable Essex Tech assessment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Okay, great.
Opposed? None.
Can we
Okay.
add like the Beverly Airport?
No.
onto it? No.
That's not
That's
budget.
That's gonna be
Okay, all right.
separate.
That will be separate, okay. All right.
Okay, at this time, we'll take a 6-minute recess before the clerk. I'll give you time to get prepared.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were trying to get your time.
present information on vote by mail for local elections.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've given you a memo that our department put together some vote-by-mail information for all the elections from March 3rd, 2020 through the November 8th, 2022 election. What you see in that chart is the first column is telling you how many vote-by-mail requests that we got, so that's how many requests we got and how many ballots we mailed out. The next column is telling you how many of those vote-by-mail applications, ballots were returned to us. The next column is telling you how many people early voted in person, which would be in this room, and then the total ballots cast for the elections that are listed. One of the changes that came into play with the Votes Act of 2022 is that the state has decided that vote by mail would be allowed for every election. The state elections, we don't have any control over. The local elections, we do have some control on whether we do allow vote by mail. Some of the things to consider with that is that there would be no state reimbursement for local election for early voting. The select board can opt out of vote by mail for local elections, but they would have to do that every year. In 2023, so that would be May of 2023, vote by mail would be allowed for the local election unless the board opts out. The state will not be sending out those vote by mail cards that they send out. I think I have one here. So the state sends out these cards for a state election. So for local elections, the state will not be sending these cards out. So in 2023, there could be a minimal impact for vote by mail because the state would not be sending out the vote by mail cards because the state does not have an election in 2023. When we get to 2024, the state would be sending out these vote by mail cards for the March election. On these cards, one of the options is all elections. It would say all 2024 elections. So if we as a town adopt vote by mail, in March of 2024, we would get hit with thousands of people checking off all elections this year, which would include the May election in 2024. So I've kind of given you some.
Just one
Yes, go right
clarification.
ahead.
They check off all elections, so automatically the state will send them a ballot for the local election?
No. The state does not send them. So in March of 2024, at the beginning of that presidential cycle, so it'd be the March election. So in January, beginning of February, they would send out the card. It's going to say all 2024 elections, which means they could pick the local election, they could pick just the March election, the September election, the November election. Most people are going to check off all elections this year, right? So that being said, in 2024, looking at the numbers that we had, if you go back to your 2000 cycle, potentially we could have 6,000 people by checking all elections requesting a ballot for local, for the May election. So the estimated cost for that, and it's really just a guess, because we don't have any idea how many people would check off all elections. But let's say it's 6,000 people. We would have to assume all the funding for that postage, those ballots, all of that. We wouldn't pay for the cards because the state is sending the cards out. But if we took a rough estimate of 6,000 people saying they want it, times 81 cents for the postage for the ballot, it would cost $48.60, plus the additional cost of the ballots themselves. So in 2024, we would be looking at $6,610. But beginning in 2025, so if you decide to go this route, my concern is that what we want to do is keep a level playing field for all candidates for every election every year. So if you choose to allow the vote by mail, starting in 2025, in order to do it correctly, we would have to have cards created similar to this and do our own mailing for every local election between the presidential cycles. So for 3 years, we would have to incur the cost of mailing out these cards. I've given you, so we have 22,000 voters. The estimate to send the cards out, the estimate for the cards is like $7,500. The postage to send the cards is like $10,000. Postage for outgoing ballots, $4,800. Additional costs for 6,000 ballots. So it would cost approximately $24,000 starting in 2020 per election, starting in 2025.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
clarification, when you say per election, per local election,
Per local election, yes.
right? Any state election, any other election is covered by the state right now?
Yes, the state is, well, we pay for it up front and then get reimbursed. So we just had the September election, the November election.
So in 2024, it would be under $10,000.
In 2024, it would be under, yes, it would,
And in 2025, it would be 26,000?
about 24, because
24,000 now.
you have the cost of doing these cards.
Of the extra cards.
Yes. My concern is that from year to year, you're gonna inflate your voter participation unless you do this. You either should do it every time or no vote by mail. You could do early voting in person as a compromise.
So for '23, which there's no state or federal elections.
Correct.
It's just the May election.
Yep.
And then if we don't vote to opt out.
Yep.
Then we're gonna have to notify people somehow that they can vote by mail if they request.
We're not required to send anything out. We could post on the website that, vote by mail is an option. And if you look at this chart here, we did allow vote by mail at, it looks like the May of '21 election. So,
Well,
there were
during
very
co-
few.
that was during COVID.
Well, right, so it's very hard. You
Right,
just
you-
have
you
no
can't-
idea what
right.
you're gonna end up with. But the voter in 2023 would have to take the initiative to ask for the vote by mail. We run into our predicament when the state in 2024 sends these cards. That's when you really are that's the point where you're either all in or you're all out. 2023, we could just kind of slide through.
So is it a good idea to work on '23 to see what happens and kind of worry about '24 later? Do we have to decide on '24 now?
Well, I'm working on the budget for 2024
Yeah,
now.
okay.
So,
Well, you'll figure the high
I-
cost and
we
depending on
could
what happens.
potentially put in for it in the budget and then,
Early voting in person,
yes.
is that something we need to respond to? Do we have to opt in, opt out? Could the Register of Voters determine that?
Yes, the Registrar of Voters determines in-person early vote. Wally Tybert, one of the registrars, is here tonight, so you would have half of your registrars are in the room. In-person early voting will need to be recommended by at least half of your Registrar of Voters.
So that's not our decision.
That's not your decision.
Okay.
However, in my view, and I haven't had a meeting with the registrars on this, I don't really see the need to have both vote by mail and in-person early vote. So if you're going to allow vote by mail, then people can just vote by mail and don't need to do in-person early vote. But if there was no vote by mail, then the in-person early voting.
Do you need a decision from us tonight?
I do not.
Okay, so.
This is
Board
informational.
members, it's,
Can I ask just a point of
Go ahead.
clarification? So, and we're talking only about vote by mail for local elections. State elections will continue to have vote by mail.
have no Right. choice.
Regardless, right, because during the 4 state elections during COVID, vote by mail, the first time represented almost 50% of the ballots cast. So, and it's dropped every election since then. So it's close to 50%, and in the most recent state election, it was down to 30%. And to your point, Kathy, the vote by mail at the local elections, when the cards haven't gone out to everybody, we had one election where you had both options, and it was around 4% versus 5%, so very similar numbers.
so just historically speaking, local elections will draw 900, and the top is 3,000. Is that correct?
For voters?
For voters.
I think we had 13% the last time we had an election. Wait a minute, let me see. What was that, 21? In May of 21, we had 13% turnout.
Was how many?
That was high. You had 2846.
28, okay.
And I do think that was on the high.
That was on the high.
That's the high end. You haven't had anything since like
Right.
2006.
And the average is probably 1,800, looking at, okay, so we can anticipate roughly 1,800, maybe more, at the next election. So that's we have to think. I hate to tell people they can't vote by mail, but if they have early voting option.
And to clarify, Kathy, when I asked you the question, this would restrict vote by mail for anybody, but there are still opportunities if you have hardships or need to vote by mail.
Yes,
Absentees.
absentee doesn't go away. Even if whether you have vote by mail or not, you still have to have absentee voting for those that it applies for.
Got no questions?
Yeah, if we opt out, does that mean that that card will not say all elections? Is it going to automatically say all elections no matter what?
I think what this is going to say, it's going to have some reference to it. I believe what they'll do is they'll put local election where applicable is what they'll do.
But that would be for 24.
But that would be in 24.
Again, but consistency is important,
Yes.
obviously. We still got people fighting the 1 precinct, 8 precinct fight. And that's been many, many years. Consistency is important. I would think that we should, my opinion is I think we should continue to do mail-in ballots at the $6,000 cost, roughly $6,000. In the off years, not necessarily publish our own cards, but rather publicize it on the webpage, so basically every year have mail-in at our local elections for roughly under $10,000. But not incur the cost of these cards on the years that the state isn't doing it for us, excuse me.
That's all, so the March of 24 is
Right.
when the state is doing it.
Okay,
So that cost is up, and these are estimates, of
Right.
course, because I don't know what the numbers are. But, so on the year where the state is sending the card out.
Yep.
You're talking
6,500.
right,
7,000, let's say
$7,000.
$7,000 just for round numbers.
Correct.
I think we should adopt the $7,000 cost continuously to allow for mail-in ballots. But on the year that the state does not send that for the local elections, we don't have to send it either. We can publicize it in other ways.
I don't think you have you don't have a level playing field. If you
Can I-
do that.
be consistent, you're gonna be consistent all the way across the board.
Including the mailing cards.
You gotta go to the
But can I?
microphone. Mike, go to the microphone. You gotta go there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so you are the consistent all the way through.
People at
I'm
home.
Wally Tybert, registrar. We register today. You're either gonna be consistent all the way through or not consistent all the way through. If you get somebody at home that's looking for the card every year to get their vote by mail, then they don't get it, they don't vote. All right, is it fair because they don't use your website? Or if they're in a nursing home and they don't have access to
Okay,
the,
so other than 25, where there's no other elections, what's the cycle of on again, off again? Meaning
With the cards from the
with
state?
with the cards from the state.
The only ones that will impact us is on a presidential year, because the March election is what gets us, because these cards would go out prior to our local election. This year,
For
for
a
example.
presidential
On a
election year.
presidential year. This year, we did have a September election.
Yep.
And the cards came out, but the cards don't go out until August.
Okay, so.
Therefore,
Yep, we will
we're
have
done.
missed the cycle.
Yes.
So it'll be 3 years, and let's say the numbers, and I realize they're completely rough, but let's say the presidential year is 7,000, non-presidential years would be roughly 24,000, 25,000.
That's high.
Okay, well, what did you have?
I'm looking at the total ballots cast
No,
for the local.
The cost of sending out those cards as well as the ballots, you said. I thought you said it was somewhere around 20-something thousand.
24.
25, okay.
Yes.
So.
Okay, give me 25, thanks.
25. So
Okay.
it'll be 25, 25, 25, 75, 7,000.
Yes,
Cyclically, okay.
yes.
I just want to have understanding, so it's 3 years at 25 and 1 year we get a reduction because it's a presidential
Because
election and the
they're-
state's going to cover it for us.
Yes, right. So the concern that Wally and myself and probably the other registrars, as I say, we haven't had a meeting, but the concern is for the candidates that are on those ballots.
Yep.
So it's, is it an unfair advantage or is it an unfair disadvantage to be on a ballot during a presidential year when you're going to have this overinflated participation?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the registrar, realizing it's only, hold on, Wally, realizing it's only one registrar's opinion, understanding that consistency is important, I would want that. What do you feel about the inconsistency of not having in-person voting on the non-presidential years?
That's really up to you. But whatever you choose, it would be consistent. I happen to think the in-person voting is well during business hours.
In-person early voting?
Yep.
My thought on the in-person early voting, the state has also moved the last day to register to vote from 20 days before an election to 10 days before an election, which means that our Tuesday elections, 10 days prior, is always a Saturday. So someone has to be here for people to register to vote on that 10 days before the election.
Yep.
So my recommendation would be, Wally may want to add or just go with this, is that we go with like a 6-hour window on that Saturday for in-person early vote.
Okay.
As a compromise to, the vote by mail.
Right. We have registrars because, and I respect the role that they provide, so I'm looking for Wally to help us with how consistent is consistent. We'll have consistency in the cards and the mail-in ballots. We'll have less consistency in the 2-week window of open voting that we sometimes have. And
Unless they change the law again. I mean, it's going to be the 2 weeks.
Right.
Till we change it.
But I want you to know how, I just want to know how fervent you felt as one of the registrars, as representative.
So, I prefer this one because I think particularly everybody who's slower, that whole early registration, the whole early voting gets you in here easily with the elevator and all day to do it if you need it. That being said, whatever you choose, just choose it consistently from this decision and let it carry forward till something drastic changes and we have to do something else. But whatever the consistency is, just carry it all the way through. But we're going to be required to be here the Saturday before anyway.
Yep.
So it's not an expense other than, the setup.
Then, given that, I would consider consistent cards, consistent mail-in ballot, and on the years that it's not the wider window of early voting. We do early voting on the day that you have to be here anyhow and absorb and accept that cost. That's Saturday.
I'm confused. You're saying you're recommending that we do send the cards for 3 years So if we're gonna do vote by mail,
Yeah,
then we don't need to do in-person early vote. Because
Okay.
all those people who would do in-person early vote
Have the option to.
can vote by mail.
okay. Then I recommend the consistency of always
We're
having
not
the cards
voting
out.
tonight.
I know.
Yeah.
But I'm
I mean, you guys just
suggesting
take
that
it in, it's all
consistency of
information.
always sending the card, whether it's the price, the cost is absorbed by us or by the state,
Mm-hmm.
and consistently allow mail-in voting
For all local elections.
for all local elections.
Okay, so, and we don't, the only vote you would need to take is if the board chooses to opt out, which you could do up to 45 days before the local election. But for budget purposes, you know, we really need to know what way we're leaning. But if the board has any other questions
Matt,
related
questions?
to this topic?
Yeah, I have a couple questions and comments. First, the March 24 election, what is that? Is that a primary?
That's your presidential, yeah,
Primary.
that's a primary.
Presidential
That's the
primary.
presidential primary.
Okay. So for May of '25, it doesn't seem cost-effective to send out a card to 22,000 voters when we have less than 15% turnout. So I would be in favor of doing that Saturday here, in early voting in person. And then I think for the next week, you would have staff here that would be able to, during their normal working hours, be able to also do early voting. Like Saturday would be special, someone would have to come in and there would be a additional cost for that. But for the next week or so, that's work hours where someone from your office would already be here. Would you be able to do early voting for that period of time as well?
We would probably need additional staff to do that,
Okay.
because we would be preparing for election and not be able to be in this room and doing
Okay.
all of that. You know, how much extra staff, I don't know. It could be bringing 2 extra poll workers in, but there is a drop dead date on the close off of vote early in person.
Okay.
And I'm thinking it's that Saturday. I'd have to look at that timeline.
And is there a guesstimate about what the early in-person voting would cost? I assume it would be significantly less than what it would cost to send out these cards.
Right, you're probably talking, I would probably have three poll workers in here to do that, along with us, who, as
So
you
it'd
say,
be-
we would already be here. That would be minimal,
So less than
couple
$1,000.
hundred. Yeah, right.
Yeah, again, it doesn't make sense to send cards out to 22,000 voters when there's such a low turnout for a May election. But that's just my thought. I'm not really clear on the consistency year over year, but I think if we have to pay out of pocket, the state's not going to cover the cost. That would try to kind of rein in the expense. We're still allowing someone to come in person and vote, and then, as you mentioned, the absentee ballots are also an option for anyone who is not able to do in person early. So those are my thoughts, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David.
No, one of the thoughts, the only thought I'm having is, I wonder if there's any way of soliciting public opinion as to whether or not, you know, what people's preference to confront. Do you want to spend $24,000 in order to do X, Y, Z, or do you want to, you know, not do the vote by mail? So, no matter what we do, there's going to be people criticizing, you know.
Yep.
But I'm just wondering if there is a way of getting some public feedback on this. Is it something that is so sophisticated that we couldn't do that, or can it be stated in 3 sentences? And there's still lots of people don't know how to use the web or the websites. You know, some people just rely upon what's left of the Salem News and their
If you
neighbor.
get on, may I? If you get on your off years where it's just a town election.
The what?
If you get on your off years where it's a town election and you're running for town meeting, you know, and you've got 8% of the people voting in that one, You know, is there an advantage to running on a presidential year where you've got all this interest in what's going on around? I mean, in the fairness of consistency, you know, where do you draw that line? I know we're trying to draw it with a dollar, but you're really trying to keep your elections as steady, one way or the other. We can either go all in or go all out. Either way, it's consistent. But I think to try to choose which election we send cards out for, which one we don't, is wrong on that one. So, you know, my opinion would be either all in or all out.
Thank you, Wally. Maureen?
I'm all set.
Gardner?
In the course of the discussion, I just wonder if there isn't another opportunity other than the cards, which is to say, is the card personalized? One goes to Gardner, one goes to Trish, one goes to Lisa at my household.
Yes.
Can we consider something in our electric bills, in our tax bills, in our whatever bills that say, if you're interested in mail-in voting, please write your name and return it. And that way, we can mitigate some of that cost, meaning it doesn't have to be personalized. It can just be, I'm going to fill in my name and say yes, and send it back, whether it comes through the bills or whatever it is.
So what you got to consider with that is, if you put it in the tax bill, you're omitting 25% of the population who are renters. And I can't guarantee they're voters. Right? And if you do the light bill, I still haven't been able to find out how many hard copy bills are sent out on a given month. I only know that so many people pay online, but that doesn't tell me how many bills go out.
And I'm wondering if there's some, even if we send duplicates out, it won't matter if we send duplicates out. So if we send one in the tax bill and one in the electric bill, and someone gets two, okay, and they've either opt in, opt out, or whatever it is there some mechanism of billing that we do now that covers renters? Is a good point, but would cover them? Is it excise tax? Is it some other tax that, or bill?
I would guesstimate that you'd get more people through the excise tax.
So everybody has a car, or
Yeah, pretty much, because a renter may have their lights paid for, because the meters aren't separated.
same with water, yeah, whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, the landlord pays for the water.
I'm brainstorming here and just thinking, is there another mechanism other than a separate, individual, personalized card?
Then there's a cycle of the excise tax, when those go out. They go out early, but
But
if you
you
buy a
could
car in
collect-
June,
But you can collect them all year.
yeah.
I think part of the reason the state sends the personalized is to have airtight control over each voter getting one card. One concern for Kathy's staff would be if we're duplicating or if we're putting the same, somebody might fill it out twice or three times, if they get it 2 or 3 times, and then Kathy's staff has to evaluate.
No,
But I think
the
with elections,
return
the
would
consistency
indicate-
is, yeah.
You would have to say, even though it's blank, I, Gardner S. Trask at 31 Fellow Street, want a. And it would be logged in along with our voter registration. So yeah, I could return 3 of them, but I'm not going to get 3 ballots. Only that is only one return.
I guess when, I'm not saying, I think the electric bill is an option, but when the cards go out, we know that one card goes to each person. When it comes back, the system is tracking that, as opposed to Kathy's staff having to make the determination, handwriting or verifying, because I think it only takes one complaint that we were.
But when the cards come back, I'm just asking a logistical question. When the cards, through you, Mr. Chairman, when the cards come back from the state or anything, I'm assuming you record, the clerk records it on the rolls or somewhere that they're going to get it. And even if more than one came back for Gardner Trask, you would still only send one ballot.
So the way these cards work, and we've found that the cards are actually the best way to process the vote by mail, because each voter there's a barcode on each voter's card. So when these cards come back, and Catherine Ellsworth has requested all elections, I have a stack of these cards. I could have 500 of them sit in front of me, all sitting the same way with the barcodes. I go into the system and I go, oh, all elections, and I go click, 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 enter, click, 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 enter. When we get duplicate paper requests, which there are applications online for vote by mail, you can fill out the paper. So what we find is that sometimes people will fill out this card, and then they fill out the paper, and then we get that. it's a much more manual process for us to go in, because now I got a stack of papers and I have to find that voter. So now I'm following, is the spelling right? Is the address right? Is it?
Okay.
You know-
I'm just trying to brainstorm.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that we talked a little bit about putting something on the electric bills to say something like, vote by, potentially, if we were going in this direction, to say, vote by mail, applications are available, and put the website, and people could go and get it. We also talked about potentially adding something on the census form, which we'll be sending out shortly. The problem with putting something on the census like that is that, again, only one person in that household is getting it. And in order to maintain that level playing field, you really need each voter to get their own card in their hand. Otherwise, that fourth year is not the same. And you're impacting the people on the ballot on that year. And whoever it is, you figure that out, or, roll of the dice.
So I think that we've got some thinking to do over the next couple of weeks so that we can take a vote on this at some point in time.
Yep.
I'm leaning towards early voting in person for '23, is my thought. But we'll bring this up again when you're prepared.
Okay,
So
so
this
next.
motion to table?
Motion to the table.
Second.
Yeah,
All
if
in
anybody
favor?
has
Aye.
any more questions, feel free to
Yep.
email me, and I'll, try to come up with the answers on that between now and then, so that we can kind of make a decision.
Maybe somebody watching home will have a brainstorm and give us a clear direction.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yes, it would be.
I would
Thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Thank you. All right. Town manager report to the board on various items of interest. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few brief updates tonight. I mentioned earlier that we wrapped up our preliminary departmental budget reviews today. Over the next month or so, we'll start to dial in some of our revenue projections as we work our way toward March for our budget workshop. The MMA annual meeting is January 20th and 21st in Boston. If any of the board members are interested in attending or participating, you can reach out to Ann in my office, and she can help you with the registration process. It's always a great day and a half event, a lot of good workshops, and opportunities to see what's working in other places. Fun update, I'll send this around when it's final, but the town is going to be featured in Maya's annual report for the work that we did a couple of years ago in collaboration with our unions to revamp the town's health plan when we moved from Tufts back to Maya and introduced a deductible plan alongside the existing plan with the health insurance opt-out. It was, in Maya's view, a very successful and smooth process, and they wanted to highlight that in their annual report this year as an example, which we were thrilled to be asked to do that and to participate in the interviews for that. So when that's available, I'll circulate that, share it with the board. We had our public, the Danvers Public Schools hosted their DPW appreciation breakfast this morning at the high school. That's an annual event I've attended every year that I've been here. Falconize performs a few songs. It's really a nice event. I think it's symbolic of the partnership that exists between the town and the schools. We maintain all their buildings so they can focus on education, and they work hard to keep the buildings open and safe and secure and clean, as well as the ground. So I know the divisions really appreciate it, and it's very nice that the schools do that each year. And then last, the school committee had a special meeting at 4 o'clock today. I don't know if anybody tuned into that, but they announced 3 finalists for the superintendent search that was initiated earlier this fall. It sounds like they'll be trying to move forward with interviews in January. 3 very different candidates, it appears. There's an assistant superintendent from the metro area, a superintendent from Maine, and a high school principal from the North Shore were the 3 candidates. I believe there were 16 applicants. The screening subcommittee interviewed, I believe, 7 and brought these 3 forward for public interviews at the full school committee. So that process is moving forward. Mary Wormers has done a terrific job as the acting superintendent, along with her team. Adam and Pam in particular, the business manager and the superintendent, the high school principal. And Mary was invited to participate in that process and help, and she'll be here. She'll be retiring later this year, but has committed to see the transition through. So a lot of thanks to Mary, and it'll be important for as that process wraps up and they hire their next superintendent. Other than that, I hope everybody has a safe and happy holiday, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate. Hope it's joyful and surrounded by friends and family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The clerk has an update on the consent calendar before we approve it.
On your consent calendar, under Class 2 dealer license, I received an email yesterday from Carvana. They are vacating the property on Andover Street, effective this week. So they pulled their renewal application. So you would not want to vote on that one.
Thank you. I move the consent calendar as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Carvana, is that the one next to Lowe's?
It's right in front of Cane's.
Cane's.
They took
Oh,
up
on
some space
Cane's.
behind Cane's.
Okay.
I'm not
Thank
quite
you.
sure what the reasoning was behind that, but I just got an email from them. Okay,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
so.
a good rumor. Thank you. Don't spread rumors, Tim. All right, number 10. New business, previous new business updates, select board closing comments. Maureen?
I want to wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays. I also wanted to thank the town clerk for organizing, along with the other managers, for our business get-together that we had last Tuesday at the Berry Tavern. You know, Louis was there, Wally was there. It'd be nice to see more business owners come.
Them, but there were a couple of others of the same discussion point. And I'm hopeful that tonight's meeting about the airport will lead us in with some solid directions to the town manager and the Aaron Henry to discuss with the mayor. So, and if there's any support I can give, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt?
Echo previous comments. Wish everyone happy holidays and a safe 2023.
Thank you. David?
Thank you, Dan. I would like to conclude by saying that I'm really serious about the potential for a forceful, aggressive opposition by the town of Danvers to any expansion at the airport, and also to remind people, especially people my age, there's no reason to stay home alone. The Danvers YMCA and the Danvers Recreation Department and our own Danvers Senior Center have lots of things going on, including a lot of good food. Thank you.
Thank you. As I stated in the beginning of the meeting, we have a code of conduct that was adopted in 2018. We didn't have the opportunity to meet with the mediator to review it, so I'd like to appoint a subcommittee to review the code of conduct and come back with some recommendations. I have copies of other communities' code of conduct. I believe Steve does as well. Gardner and David, would you be willing to serve on a subcommittee to review and come back with a code of conduct?
Yes, indeed.
That would be appropriate. Thank you.
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Okay. That's all I have on my mind. To see a vet, thank the vet for their service, and Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year's to all, and meeting's adjourned. Whoop.
Item 11.
Thank you. Meeting is still adjourned, Steve, but thank you.